Good evening. I want to call the Hopkinton Town Council meeting of December 17th, 2018 to order with a moment of silent meditation and salute to the flag. First up, we want to move the town business ahead of the ordinance and deal with the ordinance after. That typically takes a longer period of time. Sylvia?
I move that we begin with the consent agenda and into the last item on the agenda ahead of the ordinance amendment.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, consent agenda, approved town council meeting minutes of December 3rd, 2018, except the November 13th, 2018 transcript as a record of the hearing filed by Southern Sky Renewable Energy, Rhode Island LLC, LR6A owner, LLC owner, LLC, and Realty Financial Partners Limited Partnership, accept the following monthly financial activity report. Town clerk, approve refunds resulting from overpayment of 2018 real property tax submitted by the tax collector.
Can we hold the third, the
Sure.
council meeting minutes?
Sure.
I make a motion to approve the town council meeting minutes of December 3rd, 2018, and to accept the following monthly financial report.
She didn't hear me. Barbara, you want to pull off December 3rd minutes?
What's a photo?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda except for December 3rd.
A second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. What page, Sylvia?
Page 6, right in the middle. It's about 15 lines down. Justin Bentley, I'm just going to repeat the sentence, of Diamond Hill Road wished to ask the town councilors to please stop referring to he and his children as being burdens to the town. And after I heard that, I just, you can't get everything in, but I commented that our residents are not burdens. That's all.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve town council meeting minutes of December 3rd with corrections.
A second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. First public forum. Anyone wishing to speak? Okay. Town manager report, Bill McGarry.
Thank you. On December 5th, my office began the process of developing annual goals for the upcoming FY19-20 fiscal year and the multi-year goals for fiscal years 21 through 23. Department heads submitted their respective goals to my office, where they were placed on 2 lists and then discussed at our annual goals meeting scheduled for January 4th. Once completed, they'll be presented to the town council during the second meeting in January for consideration and possible adoption. And lastly, on December 7th, I convened a meeting between Hopkinton and Richmond town officials and Eric Laframboise of the water company that serves both Richmond and Hopkinton with respect to installing some sub pumps and electrical equipment in the water meter pit located at the Hopkinton-Richmond town line. After considerable discussion, correspondence was forwarded from Eric to the Department of Health, informing them of the results of the meeting and our compliance issues. And more will follow at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill, folks? Okay, thanks, Bill. First item on the old business, number 1, discuss, consider, and vote to send a letter to Charahoe School Committee relative to the omnibus meeting agenda to return to previous format where individual towns can request items placed on the agenda. This was asked to be put on by Scott Bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Traditionally, for many years, the towns were asked to submit items for the omnibus agenda, and then they got into the practice of eliminating that and only doing the budget, which I think is highly short-sighted, specifically because probably the main reason is that in January, the General Assembly meets, and if we have any issues or any legislation related or any ideas, that's the time to state them. And all they do now is the budget. The problem with that is that the budget really is a living document, so by the time it comes to the hearing and a vote by the voters, they can be changed. So I think, plus in addition to that, there's numerous workshops that people can come and state their opinion on the budget. So I really think that they should return to the other format. If any towns have anything to say or they want to discuss, that's the time to do it. And certainly because of the open meetings law, it's really incumbent on us to bring forward those ideas. As you know, today we did get an email with the agenda, and all it was the budget. And needless to say, I don't think we can change that because we would have to contact the school committee and ask them to put it on the agenda, which their next meeting is not till the day before. I believe they meet always on the second and fourth Tuesdays. But I would like to make a motion and send a letter to the Terre Haute School Committee saying they, in the future, adopt an omnibus meeting agenda and return to the previous format where individual towns can request items to be placed on the agenda in the future. And I make that a motion.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Sylvia, seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yes, we've been doing the Terre Haute school budget omnibus meeting. I've certainly been there for 12 years. And for any number of years, it was, as Scott has said, is that they brought other issues forward. The problem that I have is the omnibus meeting, specifically in January, is an introduction of the Terre Haute budget, so that the three town councils, which have to be brought forward as full town councils at that meeting, get a chance to look at the line items, look at the changes that the Terre Haute School Department is trying to make. This is a very long process all by itself. And as far as all of us getting together to discuss with the legislature all of the school board issues that could come forward, it's an enormous topic. We cannot come to a consensus of three councils in one meeting to put things before the legislature. There is no way the three councils can discuss and come to a consensus at a single meeting. It's not possible. So the information that he wants to send forward could not be agreed to at one point, since it needs to be discussed, thought about, and brought forward again. So I would prefer that it stays concentrated on the school budget, which is 3/4 of our budget, and it is the most important section of it. Anything that you want to bring up as an additional point or an additional issue with the legislature can be brought up at a school board meeting through public forum, or you can ask to have it brought forward. That's per town council. If you want to send a letter to all three town councils to say we would like to have a consensus on this or that issue, that's acceptable via the town councils, but it does not have to go through Terre Haute.
Yeah. Sharon, do you have any comments on it? Okay.
Frank?
Briefly, the process, as mentioned, prior to 4 or 5 years ago, and for decades, the school committee would send a letter to the 3 town councils and ask them to submit 2 agenda items, and each town would submit whatever it is they needed. Sometimes it was 1 item, but it would go to the school committee, they'd look it over, and they'd make a decision, then they set an agenda. So in addition to the budget, it would be other items brought forward. Never did it keep us out late at night. We were always done well before 9:30. The only thing I'd like to change about the motion is that I'd like to see this letter go to the 3 town councils, because it's the 3 town councils who are the ones that would be submitting items. I believe that if we have support of the other 2 towns to add items, I believe the school committee would go along with it. And I was just going to suggest that the school committee get CC'd on it, so they'd know what we were up to. But obviously there isn't time for this year, but it could be done for next year. The other item is that
I haven't brought that one up yet.
Oh, no, I don't, no, I'm not going to bring up the second agenda item. It's just that if we could move forward on this and go back to the method we used, and the only reason it changed to go to just the school department was because at one point Richmond wanted to have a meeting. They wanted to change the Charahoe Act, and they wanted a separate meeting to discuss it, and the 3 town councils got together at Charahoe, and we had our meeting. So then it became, well, we don't need to talk about these items again, let's just do the budget. So we're not having that 3 town council meeting anymore, and it was just temporary in my mind. So I would support going back to the old method. And the only change I wanted to make was to amend, I move that we amend the motion to send this letter to the 3 town councils and CC the school committee.
The 2 other town councils.
Second.
Yeah, we don't send it to ourselves.
Did you amend the motion?
Yes. And there was a second.
Barbara seconded.
Yes.
Okay. The only comment I want to make is at the last agenda, we didn't put on there to vote. So I reached out to a colleague of mine at Richmond Town Council, and he wasn't of the opinion to add any more to the agenda, but that was just one person, so he thought it was just too cumbersome a meeting to add more to it. But I know how important it is to Scott, so, okay. You want to add more?
The thing that people have to understand is that the budget is a living document. By law, the school committee exclusively has the power to move line items around after that budget's adopted. They have that legal right. In addition to that, since we are in a regional school district, we do not have the option as a town council, like the Wesley Town Council does, to set the bottom line of their school budget. We don't have that power in a regional school district. So that situation needs to be responsible, be noted, I'm sorry. But anyways, I believe that if we're going to talk about stuff in letters to the editor or any public comments, the political leadership of the Charahoe region, the 3 town councils and the school committee need to get together and share out their ideas. And there's always time to certainly talk about the budget. We have a budget hearing, the council people usually go. We have workshops in addition to the omnibus meeting. So the budget process itself is a long process. And that's what I want to say. And I thank Sylvia for that amendment.
I'd just like to make one correction. The town councils do not set the bottom line of the school budget, but the citizens do. And the citizens set that bottom line at the Charahoe financial vote. You all make that decision. It is not up to a town council. And each town makes that decision generally.
Unless I misspoke, I said that the regional town councils and regional school districts do not set the bottom line of the school budget like a single-member town like Westerly. The town council has the power in that, but we don't have that power. I think I said that unless I misspoke. Thank you.
Okay. So motion made, amended, and seconded, I guess. All those in favor of sending a letter to on the amendment, right? All those in favor of sending the letter, Scott suggests, to the school committee and all two councils, Richmond and Charlestown, vote by saying aye. Aye. Folks that don't agree? You good? You guys, okay, thank you, I didn't hear you.
Just for the amendment? We're
Just-
voting on just the amendment?
The amendment.
Just the amendment, right?
Yeah,
Right,
and then the motion as amended.
okay. Now, vote on the motion,
Did
right?
it pass,
Yes.
the amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So all those in favor of the amendment?
The main motion as amended.
The main motion as amended.
Yes.
Scott? You gonna vote?
Yes.
Okay, yes?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so
Thank
we'll
you.
send the letter, thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
Okay. Next item under old business, discuss, consider, and vote to send a letter to the municipalities, state agencies, and entities, including school districts, regarding state funding of education. Scott? Yes.
Thank you. One of the problems that we have with development in a lot of the smaller towns and all the issues of the 39 cities and towns, their assessable bases vary, which creates a problem even with like development issues because people are interested in property tax relief. And the amount of each town gives to education of that total budget varies from city and town. The Rhode Island State Constitution, specifically Article 12, Section 1, says the General Assembly shall promote education. And I don't think the state of Rhode Island does that good a job. I think they should be funding education better because if they did so, it would be less stress on the foundation of the state, the 39 cities and towns. And one of the problems is that the state of Rhode Island and the political leadership feels so compelled they can support things like the Studios 38 deal or get behind the Plus Stadium deal, then certainly they should be able to come up with more money to support our schools and reduce stress on our property taxpayers. I think the biggest tax issue in this state is property tax relief in our cities and towns. And not every town spends the biggest percentage, various percentages on education versus general government. My concern is that the League of Cities and Towns should hold state government accountable. Even though the General Assembly can blow off their cities and towns, I think the cities and towns need to stand up to the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation and tell them that we need more consideration on state aid. Not only state aid, but the way they fund education. Basically, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay, anyone have any comments? Okay. Sylvia, you good?
The big question is who we should send letters to. I think I would move that we send letters to you can insert any groups. I move that every mayor and town administrator, city council, and local school committee throughout the state, every member of the Rhode Island General Assembly and the Rhode Island Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, the Rhode Island Association of School Committees, the Rhode Island Superintendent Rhode Island School Superintendents Association, the Rhode Island NEA, and the Rhode Island American Federation of Teachers, and they be sent that and ask if they're willing to get behind an effort to hold the state more accountable for state aid to education, more funding for education. Thank you. I make that a motion.
Okay, Sylvia, second. Any further discussion, folks? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Aye, thank you.
I'd like to thank you for that support. It might not go anywhere, but I think the statement has to be made, and I included all the stakeholders organized labor, the management of our school system, the superintendents, the school committee association, and the state league of cities and towns, the general assembly. So they can't say they haven't been told. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. First item under new business, discuss, consider, and possibly vote on a request from the Wood Pawcatuck Wild and Scenic Study Committee for an appointment of representatives, one representative and one alternate, to the Wild and Scenic Rivers Stewardship Council. I'm not sure what the term was, Lisa. I think it's maybe 1 or 2 years. There was a neighbor of mine, Dave Gieber's wife, that's through work commitment, she can't re-up her commitment to this organization. The office is on Arcadia Road. It's a great organization, which is, maybe there's someone in the audience, if one of you folks know of anybody that would be willing to serve. I'll just read a quick snapshot of what they're looking for. To be on the Stewardship Council, each representative must be a resident of our town and be prepared to represent the town in all regards. They will be expected to provide communications between the Stewardship Council and the town. They must commit to a high degree of involvement in the committee meetings, likely every other month, and in ancillary activities such as participating on subcommittees, conducting outreach, and writing needed documentation. Previous experience in these activities is a plus but not necessary. What they really need is a high level of enthusiasm for the protection and promotion of the special rivers in our town. The term of each representative will be for 2 years, or as determined as necessary by the Stewardship Council in the town. I guess if anybody's interested, please see Lisa Cook-Martin, the clerk. I guess we don't have any folks to nominate, I guess, right? So, all right. Next, second item under new business, discuss, consider, and vote to award the bid on the town's statistical reappraisal and reevaluation of taxable and exempt real property effective December 31st, 2019 to Vision Government Solutions of Northborough, Mass. in the amount of $53,800 with a cost of $500 each, run to attach title cards to property record cards in the CMA software. Liz Monty, our tax assessor.
Good evening. After careful consideration, although we did have two bids that were quite similar, after careful consideration, I found the two bids to be quite similar, but the value and the experience and the comfort level that the town would receive from Vision Government Solutions outweighs that of Northeast Revaluation. Vision came in at $53,800 and Northeast Reval came in at $58,000, so additionally they were the lower bidder. Vision currently is the carrier of our software, so we're already familiar with them. They did perform our 12/31/2016 revaluation, and some of the team members will be coming back for that. Mr. Ferreira is the project manager, and he has been appraising property since 1975. Mr. Bork is local to Hopkinton, and he knows the market very well, also appraising property since 1983. And Mr. Downs was on the team of measure and listers that go out to the field as well. So 2 out of 3 were on the project the last time. And of course, the top gentleman has many years of experience that I'm very comfortable with. And yes. In fact, there will not be any runs, so there wouldn't be an extra charge of that $500. In the past, our archived file would be on a small manila card that's hand-typed. So they, at one point, had to attach those in the past, but that isn't something that we have to do now. We're actually working on inputting all of those ourselves into the system so they can completely go away, and we're halfway there. Mhm.
Anyone else have any questions for Liz? Scott, you have any questions? Sylvia, any questions for
Yeah,
Liz?
could you further explain what a run, the 500 run? I understand they may not need it, but what exactly is it?
They're running through the cards to see if there's an attachment for it that would be in addition to an attachment. When you sign on to the Vision Government Solution website, under chain of title, there's a box you can hit, chain of title. And when you open that box, you'll see the copy of the old manila file card. They're already attached, so you wouldn't run to attach any others because we've stopped doing that. Everything's in the computer now. Okay.
So I'll make a motion to approve the town's statistical reappraisal and revaluation of taxable property. I'd like to make a motion to award the bid for the town's statistical reappraisal and reevaluation of taxable and exempt real property to Vision Government Solutions in the amount of $53,800.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, seeing as this is a statistical evaluation, Liz, you had mentioned something about one of the individuals going out in the field.
Yes.
Why would they be going out in the field on a statistical evaluation?
Right down the street.
Every sale that has happened between January 1st in 2017 to 12/31/2019 will be examined.
Liz, could you use the microphone? You have such a soft voice.
Although statistical does mean they look at everything from the market numbers, data only, there is still some research in the market to perform. That includes permits, which would cause a new change to value if you're improving or taking down a piece of your house. That will obviously change the value. And sales that happen affect the market. So they do go out to attempt to see the interior on any sold property during the time frame of the 3 years.
Really?
Yes. They'll request. It doesn't always mean they get in, but they definitely try. It's really the only way to be able to see what's happening and why house A sold for $100,000 more than its assessed value if something like that happened. You'd be able to get in and say, well, that makes sense because they have, you know, top of the line, everything.
Thanks, Liz. So Barbara made the motion. Scott, did you second it?
I did.
Oh, Sylvia seconded, okay. Any other discussion, folks? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you, Liz. Okay, last item under new business, discuss and consider authorizing the town clerk to advertise vacancies on boards and commissions.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
And the usual,
Not just advertisements, it'll go on the website. Anything else?
I will include the stewardship also.
oh, okay, great.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay, we get to the main item on the agenda. Before we start, we're going to open up, continue the hearing on the PSCS ordinance amendment. Continue the hearing on proposed amendments to Chapter 246, non-residential photovoltaic solar energy systems. Code of Ordinances, Chapter 134, Appendix A, entitled Zoning, introduced and sponsored by Councilors Landolfi, Buck, Capalvo, Husband, and Thompson. The proposed amendments would add, revise, and/or strike language. Before we start, I asked the planner, Jim, to just kind of recap a couple of main points of what we're doing today and where we've been and where we're going, I guess. And then what we'll do is we'll go through the working draft document that I think Jim or his office has prepared with all the language changes to the current solar ordinance. We'll go page by page, and we'll see if we all come to the consensus on restricting this solar ordinance. So, Jim, without further ado, here you are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. Before we get into the substance of the ordinance tonight, I'd just like to take a moment to highlight the significance of the ordinance itself. And in order to do that, I have to make a distinction between solar projects that require zone changes and comprehensive plan changes from those that do not. And I'd like to point out that almost 5 years ago now, January 2014, the town council passed an ordinance that allowed photovoltaic solar energy systems, use code number 486, to be constructed in commercial zones and manufacturing zones. Fast forward a little bit to July of 2016, the council expanded upon that and allowed small solar projects to be done on farms. The same night, the town council approved an ordinance, number 246, which we're going to review tonight for amendment. And the significance of that ordinance is it allows the planning board to review properly and regulate and shape these arrays that are allowed by right. And to date, the planning board has approved 6 solar arrays that are on farms and 6 that are by right in commercial or manufacturing zones. So this ordinance has been useful to the planning board in doing that. In the course of reviewing those projects, the planning board, and I believe the town council for the most part, agrees that there were things in the ordinance that needed to be revisited and improved. And that is what has been before the town council now in several meetings with workshops and whatnot. You know, we present the proposed changes to you tonight for that. So basically what the point of my story is that this ordinance is necessary to do the by right projects. Any solar arrays which may require zone changes is entirely up to the town council. And if a zone is changed to allow a solar array, then this ordinance 246 would definitely apply to that. But this ordinance in no way is an attempt to encourage or facilitate the town council to do anything. I think the council has been acting as it really had to act. It responds to every request to change a zone that comes in from outside the town. Legally, you have to respond to it. And you do it on a case-by-case basis, based upon the merits, the location of the project, and I think that's entirely appropriate. And if the town council in its wisdom chooses to change a zone, fine. We have an ordinance that kicks in and the planning board can use. And if it doesn't, then at least the planning board will have a tool to review the projects that don't even have to come to the town council for any prior approval. So that's basically what we're doing here tonight. We're not really here to discuss any potential moratoriums or any particular solar projects that are being reviewed by the town in public hearings. We're really trying to focus on the merits of this ordinance and improve it so the planning board can do a better job.
Thanks, Jim. I know that I had a question on projects allowed by right, which is manufacturing, commercial, and farming. So I'm glad, Jim, thanks for that clarification. All right, so folks, I think what we'll do for the council, we'll start on the Chapter 246, the draft ordinance revisions. We'll start with page 1. All of the prior pages and incorporated, so our suggested changes are all incorporated in this document. So if we want to just refer to page 1, we'll go page by page. And page 1, it looks like doesn't... Right. So page 1 doesn't have any suggested changes right now, but we're going to start with page 1. And I'll start to my left. Sharon, questions on page 1?
On page 1, line 5, under section 2, definitions, photovoltaic solar energy systems, PSES line 5. I don't know what SEF means. It's all caps. I don't know what that means. That's right. Right there. Yeah.
That's a typo.
Typo? What should it say?
I think at one point in time we were referring to these as solar energy facilities.
So it should be PSES? Okay.
Good catch.
That's it.
Anybody else have any questions on page 1? Okay, skipping over to page 2. There are a couple strikeouts and add-ons or whatever. Any questions on page 2? Purpose and applicability. Barbara? No, you guys? Sylvia, anything? Okay. Okay. We'll go on to page 3. Okay. Page 3, we'll start with Sharon again.
Under number 2, it says all electrical connection and distribution lines within the facility shall be underground unless physical constraints to the land make underground lines impossible or impractical as determined by the town engineer or building official. It says electrical equipment between the facility and the utility connection may be above ground, and this is the question, if required by the utility. So these are some of the questions I have. How soon would we know that the utility would be requiring that it be above ground? What criteria is the utility using to make this decision? And what percentage of current approved projects is the utility connection planned to be above ground so far?
I know typically they're done above ground because of cost, but I know underground utilities are very expensive, but other than that,
Yeah, that determination would be made with a conversation between the utility and the solar developer. Generally speaking, the first pole or two from the main line along the street would be above ground. The utility is going to want to see certain things above ground and not buried. You know. Well, the installations, I'm not an expert in this field, but the installations that I've looked at, generally you have 1 or 2 poles that come off the main trunk line, if you will, and they go to the facility. They might go to the shutoff where the main shutoff is. So from that point on, the utility probably would allow underground service, but I don't believe the utility is going to approve anything that they're not comfortable with or that's not up to code or their standards, or else they wouldn't allow the facility to be constructed and connected to their system. So, you know.
Well, we're sort of saying we don't want to see it. So I'm just asking questions of what criteria will they use so we would know ahead of time whether the plan is going to be hidden or not.
Well, the planning board would make that request normally to put underground everything that can be put underground.
I would assume that they would have best practices. The utility companies have best practices because you're bringing extremely high voltage. So you're going to go underground, come up to a kill switch, and then you're going to continue to where the lines are going out. So at that point, it goes above ground.
Also, I think that...
They would use best practices for the state.
Correct. And I think there's a certain amount of site-specific conditions that have to be dealt with, which might require certain...
Shouldn't we have, they have best practices, shouldn't we have what
can do the best we can. We're not, a planning board and myself, we're not electrical engineers, but, and again, we're at their mercy anyway, because we can ask for anything under the sun, but they know their business, and they know.
But some of those considerations will go into your decision of whether you want to go with a project or not too. So I think we need to know what the utilities are, not just make any assumptions.
Yes. All right, so Sharon, if you have some concerns, is there anything you want to add to this paragraph so that we can kind of move forward? Like if you have concerns about making underground utilities where economically feasible, per the planning board, or utility through the development plan review or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
The only thing I'd be careful of here is the statement is electrical equipment between the facility and the utility connection may be above ground if required by the utility. I think you have to be very careful about the town determining what we feel is the best electrical equipment connection, because we're responsible then for the damage.
I'm not asking that. All I'm asking is for more information from the utility up front. You know, if there's standard rules or standard requirements, we should have that.
Yeah, go ahead,
I just
Jim.
want to state that the first sentence of that paragraph states that everything shall be underground.
Right.
So we're stating that up front, that we prefer it to be underground. The exceptions would be if the utility
Requires it,
But I think yes.
In what instances would the utility require it?
Yeah, Sharon just wants more information up front from the utility as to what constitutes underground, and what projects do constitute it, and what don't. I think the planning board could probably somewhat take care of that, Al, maybe? Sort of? Kind of? Maybe? Yeah. I know it's getting into an area that we're not experts in, but
I'm just soliciting information from the utility. I just
Right.
think we need to have it in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. We're on page 3 here. Yep. Hold on. I'm going to switch over to my right over here. Sylvia, do you have any questions or concerns on page 3?
The first one, the minimum front, side, rear yard depth. The planning board, in the last sentence, has the ability to, the authority with this amendment to change the setbacks, that they, under their authority, they are allowed to change the setbacks up to 100%. I'd like to change that to 500%.
I don't know. Anybody have any comments and questions on that? I don't know. Why are you changing it like 5-fold, I guess?
Because if it's near a residential area, as it states, I would prefer to have the planning board have the authority to go up to 500%. I'm not saying they have to, but in a certain piece of property, they may decide that, you know, I wish we could increase that amount. Well, this will say up to 500%. So just gives them another tool, a better tool than 100%.
Al, do you have any questions or concerns about that?
I can't argue with that line.
Okay. Barbara, do you have a...
I think that 500% is a number that's pulled out of the air because it doesn't have any particular reality. I think that changing the sentence to allow the planning board the authority to increase the building setbacks pertaining to PSES as they determine above the requirements for the underlying zone in instances where PSES abut residential zones. I think instead of saying 500%, it should somehow simplify and say that not give them a 100% or a 500%. Give the planning board the authority to increase the building setbacks pertaining to PSES as needed, needed or in their judgment. Jim, I don't know, you can help me with the wording on that. The judgment for the underlying zone in instances where PSES abut residential, because I don't think we have to say 100 or 500. I think we can give the planning board the opportunity to make that decision.
Seems fair enough. Jim, do you have any?
You could just strike out the words by as much as 100%, and just let it read, increase the building setbacks pertaining to PSES above the requirements. That's about as open as you can get.
Okay.
fine.
Does that sound good, Sylvia?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
Scott, you good with that? Okay. All right, we'll make that change, I guess. Thank you. All right, so we've gotten both paragraphs up the top all squared away. Anything else on page 3, folks?
So number 4, page 3A, general requirements, number 4, line 2. It says all fixtures shall be full cutoff fixtures. I don't know what a full cutoff fixture is. Definitions.
I'm a lighting designer. Full cutoff means that all of the light goes down, nothing goes up into the sky. A full cutoff fixture is established by the Illuminating Engineering Society of America. And they use that term because it means that all of the light that are on the street lamp or is on any kind of lighting is that it goes down, it does not go into the sky, and preferably not into your neighbor's yards as well. That's what the full cutoff fixture refers to. I would like to get to number 3. Number 3 is to prevent unauthorized access. The ground level facility shall be enclosed by a vinyl coated black chain link perimeter fence of no less than 6 feet high, elevated 6 inches above ground level to allow for the passage of small animals. I would like to address that with the planning board and with Jim, because I would really like to see it if once in a while we don't have to have a fence, we could have gradiated landscaping. Or the other thing is, some of the people we've already found will need privacy fencing or a different kind of fencing for especially abutting residential zones. So I think this is too narrow to allow the planning board and the property owners to say, this is an acceptable fence for me, this is an unacceptable fence. Not to mention that I also agree with, of course, Mr. Pennypacker, that anytime we can go without a fence, that's even better. But that's up to the planning board and the developer. So I'd like to have that sentence changed so there's some flexibility for the property owners.
It's my understanding that the utility requires these facilities to be fenced in for safety purposes. So you could, but you don't have to have a black chain link fence. You could have different types of fences. So we could reword it that.
Yeah, I think Barbara's point is to provide flexibility, fencing flexibility, I think, right? And/or vegetative buffers.
Correct.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The planning board can specify.
And the farmers have fences around some of theirs.
Well, most of them do, I think.
You know, some of them don't. I'd like to see buffers on them.
Okay. All right, next.
Mr. President,
Yes, Harvey.
we have a few items, can we bring them up? Or
Yeah, we're going to try and go through these, and then, yeah, just I want to get through there's not that many pages of the ordinance, and then any suggested changes, we're going to turn it over to the audience. So, yep, thank you. Sharon, you all set? No, I know, I'm just going paragraph by paragraph. So, all right, so we're good with number 3, right? As far as the... Yeah, I guess Jim's going to kind of modify that to expand the options in fencing and/or vegetative buffers, right? Okay. All right. Next is number 4, exterior lighting. The only thing I wanted to maybe add is in compliance with the town dark sky ordinance, but I don't know if that International Dark Sky Association is any different from... Oh, okay, all right. Okay. So anybody have any questions on number 4, the exterior lighting? Okay. Moving on, number 5, it starts with the maximum height. Okay.
The number 5 is the maximum height of ground-mounted panels shall be no greater than 12 feet as measured from the ground surface. The panels shall be constructed so that the rows of panels shall be tangent to a straight or curved line, not wavy or uneven. My question on the no greater than 12 feet, I'm not sure where we want to encourage the panels that are mounted above parking lots. If anyone chooses to do that, will be determined by the planning board. The height of the panels mounted above parking lots will be determined by the planning board because it has to address trucks, campers, and other objects, because we don't really address planning board possibilities for parking lots at this point. But since this is, it shall be no greater than 12 feet, I need to give the planning board some more flexibility here. I don't know how to change that, or if that's an entirely new line.
Frank? Yes. My only question is isn't that dealt with later in reference to parking lots? So we might want to hold that. Isn't that later in here?
I don't know.
Yes, so I think so.
Okay.
So let's
All right, good point.
hold that.
All right. Okay. All right, the council have any other questions on number 5, the maximum height? Okay. Number 6 starts with no PSES shall be erected, constructed, and installed. Any questions on that paragraph? Okay. Number 7, it starts with the construction and operation of all such proposed PSES. Does anybody have any questions, concerns about that paragraph? Okay. Number 8, all applicants must provide documentation. Any questions, concerns, changes about that? Okay. Number 9, the establishment of proposed PSES. Any questions about that paragraph? Okay. Number 10, the PSES shall be designed. Any questions on that paragraph? Okay. That's page 3. Moving to page 4, starts with number 11. The applicant shall avoid any disruption, interference, loss of radio, telephone, television. Any questions on that? Okay. Number 12, all precautions must be taken to protect neighboring properties. Any questions on that? From radiation? Yes.
I have a question.
Well,
Any question on 12? Okay. All right, number 13, solar panels and associated equipment on specific structures. It's kind of an involved number, and I'm sure we'll have some questions.
I have questions on that one.
All right, Scott, why don't you start?
Thank you. I find it offensive that I read in concern with solar in this town about having solar arrays in rural farm and residential areas, R80 zones. And I'm seeing here in this proposal, if there's, I'll read the whole sentence. The entirety of all structures and associated equipment constituting the PSES shall cover no more than 75% of commercial and manufacturing zone parcels. If the parcel is zoned R80 and the applicant is seeking to rezone the parcel, no more than 30% of the parcel shall be covered. I think that that's really ridiculous. I think when people have RF80, it's supposed to be rural farming and residential. And if you, and everybody knows that lot sizes vary in R80, that in theory you could have a small lot or small land and give them 30% of R80. That doesn't make sense at all. And I'm definitely for the reduction of that amount. Basically, actually it's obscene, really, if you want to be honest, but the fact of the matter is, my position is that we're trying to help the taxpayers, the property taxpayers in this town. And we have, in this town, we have some farms and large landowners that have small solar. I'm for small solar, I'm not for big solar. And I think that I reflect the views of the majority of the people in this town. So I expect that to be reduced, 10%, 5%, whatever the council feels, but I absolutely do not support 30%. So I think we should come up with a percentage. Thank you.
Yes, Sylvia?
Yeah, I just want to propose that it go down to 10%, and on page 5, there would be a corresponding correction that would need to be made if we go to 10. If we change that number lower, we're going to need to work on the next page, but that's okay. So I'm in favor of 10% or less.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so before we pass the baton on, Sharon, just one second, I had asked Al to kind of give me a rationale, because I think the 30% came from a zoning regulation, I think, Al, if I'm not mistaken. That's where the percentage came from. Maybe you can just restate what you stated earlier in an earlier meeting as to where this number may have come from, just so we have a point of reference. It just didn't come from, we just didn't dream up 30%, so.
So, as I stated at a previous meeting, the percentages that you see here, 75% commercial and manufacturing, that's the current lot coverage that we have in those zones right now. So we decided to hold 75% coverage in those zones. Residential zone, Jim, if I'm not mistaken, 15%. And the planning board's consensus was 15% was perhaps a little bit conservative. So in an effort to reach out, extend the olive branch, 30% was the number. It's very subjective. But certainly when you start talking about 10 or 15%, now you're closer to what currently exists in the residential zone. So there's good substantiation for those numbers. That's how this number came to be anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Al, for the clarification. Yeah, so, all right, so, so thanks, Al, for the clarification. I knew it didn't come from the sky, so anyway, it's important. And I think, we'll chat about the percentages as we progress.
I also support 10% if that's what Sylvia is suggesting. I think if the thought was that if we do have a residential plot that becomes commercial, which I'm not for, but at any rate, if we did, making it 30%, you couldn't go back to residential. You'd already overcovered what would be allowed in residential. So you absolutely need to reduce that. And I'm all for 10%.
Okay, Barbara, do you have any questions? Okay, Scott, did you have any questions about the percentage? Sylvia had stated 10. I think, did you state 10? You're interested in 10%?
Yes.
Scott?
I could probably live with that, but I think we have to maintain the integrity of our 80 zones. Thank you.
Well, again, don't forget this also pertains to commercial manufacturing and farming too. That's why this ordinance was created in the first place. So I would like to state a 15%, which I think is current residential. So it's a little bit more than what Sylvia and Sharon suggest. That matches the current residential exposure. So
I support Councilor Davis' his attitude and Councilor Thompson's, and that's three of us, the majority of the council. Thank you.
There's one way of looking at this also. When we made a change to the farm viability ordinance, we did so in allowing solar, depending on how much acreage they have. It might be one acre, and if they had more than 50 acres of a piece of land, it might go up to 3. But what we did was we offered a way to the farmers, as many know, just to give them a little extra income. In this ordinance, if you've got a landowner who's having trouble perhaps continuing year after year to meet their taxes and come up with the money, this offers a way for them to come in with a little bit, with an option for them. It may allow a large property owner, he's like, well, I can keep my land, but I do need a little income, and if it's only 10%, then or less, then he's provided a little bit of income. I think of it in those terms, that you're going to try to help the large landowner continue to keep it as it is, rather than having to sell it because they just can't afford to live here anymore.
Okay.
That's,
Yeah, Eric, I want to try and get... Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So you brought it up on the farm viability, you brought up my question. On the Farm Viability Act, which is in many ways parallel to this. There's one provision, I think if it's less than 50 acres, the maximum is an acre. If it's more than 50, the maximum is 3 acres. So it's inconsistent to me to say 10% of a 100-acre lot is 10 acres. So solar panels, and yet a farmer can only put 3 acres. So I'm wondering why the town council wouldn't match it and say 10% with a maximum of 3, which is basically the same as the farm viability, because otherwise you have an inconsistency. You're actually disenfranchising farmers.
Well,
in that sense.
I think, yeah. Yeah, no, well noted, Eric. All right, so
Does anyone want to address that?
I'm of the opinion that I'd like to state a 15%, and I always thought, Eric, to be honest, I always thought that the farm viabilities ordinance, the way it was stated with the acreage, they call it intermediate and large in the same category. I thought it was very confusing on its merits. So I'd like to address that ordinance myself with the council. As far as helping out the farmers, I think I'm fine with 15%, and I'd like to change the farm viability ordinance to make it be more clear, or perhaps match the amendments going forward. But again, if we amend the ordinance, it'll also apply to farming and well, it will. This applies to by right. This is for commercial manufacturing and for farming. So yes, it is. As Jim noted when it's first mentioned, Jim, this applies to by right, which is commercial manufacturing and farm. Yes.
Ordinance 246, as it's currently written, would apply to farms, but I believe that the farm viability ordinance is pretty specific to farms, and I would probably say that this would apply. You're right, it needs a little bit of work, and I think Eric's right too.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So when we amend this ordinance, and that's fine, it applies to by right projects, which is farm, manufacturing, and commercial. So we just have to make sure that we're taking all those folks into consideration as well, because they're allowed by right, and they don't have to come before the council.
But I thought the farm ordinance allowed that to be, that they didn't have to come. Once you created that farm variance, and I don't want to change the farm variance. All right. So I think Eric has a point.
It's inconsistent.
Yes, it's inconsistent. So maybe it should be that for residential, the most you could have is 3 acres. Just like the farm variance. Well, if RFR, if you maybe it should only be 3 acres, not 10%.
Well, it's a good point. Good point.
Max. I would rather say it was 3 acres. Max. That's what I would say.
Right. Okay. All right. So.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. When Jim started, he had mentioned, said that this amendment or proposal, whatever you want to call it, was for existing, that does not require rezoning.
Correct.
And in this statement here, in this paragraph, it talks about parcels being rezoned. So can somebody explain to me how that is?
Yeah, so
I just don't understand.
Yeah.
Okay. If the town council were to change a zone from RFR 80 to commercial, it is then commercial.
Okay.
So in that instance, okay, where RFR 80 goes to commercial, that's what we're talking about now, either 30 or 10 or 15, whatever the number is. If something already is commercial, then they can go up to 75.
that's by right. Right.
Yeah, that's what I just don't understand.
Well, a farm could get rezoned. This is only if a farmer wants to continue farming and have this as an accessory use, if you will, or a little side.
No, not as an accessory.
No, because the farm viability ordinance allows you not to have to rezone. That's the whole purpose of it. Zoning stays the same with small farms.
Correct. Thank you, Jim. Is that Mr.? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I guess I'd like to say change it to 3 acres, not 10%.
All right, Sharon says 3 acres, not 10%.
Rather than just say 3 acres, if we want to bring this in line with farm viability ordinance, which actually makes sense, if you want something similar, then we should look at number 13, this whole section, and look at it as if they have a certain amount of acres, if they have more than 50 acres. So, I mean, we can peg that in just like the farm viability, and we can do that and have that for our decision. It's just, I don't have the farm viability in front of me, but yeah, that's what we should do, depending on how many acres somebody has.
Yeah, I think 3 acres is just insufficient, but I think I'm more like the percentages myself.
I would like, my note on this particular number 13, is the whole thing has to be discussed again. The whole thing needs to be redesigned. So I think number 13 in full should be taken a look at again. And we aren't going to do that tonight. That needs to be worked with Jim Lamphere.
That's key to this whole.
I know it is the key, which is why the whole thing needs to be redone entirely, not just in partial, but the whole thing needs to be redone.
But the longer we wait to change the solar ordinances, the longer we wait to not have this take effect. No, I know it's huge, but I think we could probably come up with a percentage of something, like whether it's, I'm of the opinion that 15% is fine, but if you folks, think otherwise, then speak up and we'll make a decision. But I think if we keep delaying this, we're just going to delay, further, and that's not going to make anything any better. So Sharon's for 3 acres to match, I think, the farm viability ordinance. Barbara, what say you? Percent? Yeah, I'm of that opinion myself, because again, this also affects commercial and manufacturing. Scott, what say you?
Say,
Those have a higher percentage already written in there. So we're really talking.
I would say 10% or lower.
What I'd like to suggest is not to get bogged down. I think the council recognizes that we need to halt large solar arrays, but we need to come up with language. So I think the idea of having this mirror the farm viability ordinance is perfect, and we don't need to have another hearing on just this section. I think we know what we need to do, and when we come to our decision, any one of us can write this up and present it the night of the decision, and if they think it's absolutely on target, then fine, and if we don't, then when we have our decision, we can tinker with it. But it's clear what we need to do, and it's clear what the audience and the townspeople want, so I don't think this is a problem. We can do it.
All right.
I realize that the council or the citizens may want to close this this hearing tonight. I am of the opinion that we should keep the hearing open because I would like to see this written in full before we close the ordinance or close this hearing. I am absolutely sure that we should leave this hearing open, and if we close it, you will never have another moment to speak. We need to leave this hearing open because we are making some substantial changes, and we should look at it in full before it is passed.
All right, that's Barbara's opinion on it. Okay. Sharon, so you're good with, yeah, okay. So I think the bulk of the council, with the exception of Barbara, would like to move forward, I guess, proceeding through this ordinance. And I think if I'm hearing, Sylvia, you want the residential component of this paragraph to say what mirror the farm viability.
Similar, yeah.
Okay. Scott, you have that opinion?
Yes, and I look forward to input from the public, which they've generously been giving me. Thank you.
Okay, I still think, 15% is probably okay. That's my opinion. It's half of what was in there before. So that's my thoughts. And, okay. All right. So,
Or less.
That's consistent with our plan, our comprehensive plan too, isn't it, keeping it rural?
So, anyway.
yep. Yep, we'll move forward. Okay. All right, so so I think we got an idea on number 13. Number 14, submissions. Barbara?
Number 14, submission to the planning board for review shall include the noise study. I want to go to the last line. A PSES that exceeds the standard shall not be permitted, and I want to add the words "to operate" by the town of Hopkinton, because the planning board, if it's reviewing it, has already the permission to do the PSES, and a PSES that's done incorrectly. If then the 40 decibels you won't know until it's turned on and it's working. So the last sentence should be a PSES that exceeds this standard shall not be permitted to operate by the town of Hopkinton, so that we can basically close it down once it is already in operation.
Well, Sylvia, yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm good with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And any questions about number 14? Okay. All right, Barbara. Number 15, before construction begins, any questions on that verbiage? Okay. Again, page 4, section B, roof-mounted solar panel requirements. Any questions on those 6 items?
Sylvia, isn't this the one you said that?
No, next page.
Next page. Okay, I'll wait till next page.
Okay, thank you. Page 5. Number 7, flat roof elements. Any questions on that? Okay. Number 8, solar panels on flat roof. Okay. Number 9, flush mounted is preferred on pitched roofs. Any questions there? Barbara?
I'm not seeing anything about parking lots. Am I missing something? Roof mounted is on a roof of a building. This is, number 7 is flat roof elements on structures that are visible. Solar panels on a flat roof shall be angled. Flush mounting is preferred on pitched roofs. No, it's not here. I think you need to add a parking lot section. Yes, number 11. So that parking lots, if you're going to put solar panels on parking lots, that the planning board should have the ability to make the decision on the height of the panels, because you don't know whether they're covering something buses go to, semis go to, or cars go to. We don't know what the height would be. It would have to be left up to the planning board.
Oh, okay, so 7 were okay, 8 were okay, and number 9, flush mounted. Any questions on that? Folks, okay. Number 10, any questions there? Systems located on slope roof shall provide. Any questions there? Sharon?
The last 2 lines. Sorry.
Last 2 lines, it says, all panels on commercial roofs shall provide this information regardless of slopes, as well as any residential roof with greater than 50% coverage. I don't understand. We're not talking about residential roofs. So why is that in there? That should be taken out. Am I right, Jim? Not residential roofs. No, it's not dealing with residential, it's dealing with commercial and manufacturing. It's a non-residential ordinance. That's the first two words in the ordinance title. So it shouldn't be there. After the word slopes, you need to take the rest of it out.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
buy that.
that makes sense. Yeah.
I'll buy that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Right, so, Chairman, let me back up. So number 10, what are you suggesting?
Take the last,
Two,
last sentence and a half after the word slopes. Take as well as any residential.
oh, okay. All right. Okay, and then did you want to add a number 11, Barbara?
Jim, we need to add a number 11 that deals with parking lot mounted, so that the planning board has flexibility to determine the heights.
Yes. Sylvia, did you want to?
No, that's good.
Okay. Jim, any thoughts on adding a parking lot section?
Well, we do have maximum height restrictions already in various zones. They go quite high, so I guess the planning board could limit the height up to the extent that, minimize the height of it. But I don't think the developer's going to build anything any higher than they need to anyway.
Right.
It's all about cost.
Right.
So I think they'll build what they need to build over a parking lot.
My concern is when we were talking about exit 1 originally, when they had the welcome center, they had discussed on the designs to have the solar panels over the parking lot. And so I want to make sure that the planning board has the ability to choose and determine and discuss with them the height of those solar panels. They could decide that the whole thing is set for buses and semis, whereas maybe they only need buses and semis in a small section, and they need lower levels of solar panels in the parking area for cars. So I think it is important. We have already seen it come to town. It just didn't go through.
That's fine.
It's okay, Jim?
The planning board can have the discretion to, limit the height.
Okay.
Some parking lots you go into, they have maximum height over the
Yeah.
beam going in. So
Yeah, right.
it all depends on what the developer wants to park in the parking garage.
Okay.
So it's going to be a two-way conversation with the planning board and the developer as to what
Sure.
they want.
Okay. All right, sounds good. So we created number 11, I guess? Okay. All right, PSE design guidelines, PSES design guidelines, number 1, land clearing, environmental and cultural impact. Any questions on that? Sylvia?
This would, I think, correspond back to the item that we had on the previous page. It was number 11, in that if we went with a percent, so suppose it was 10%, then this sentence that's the second paragraph, it says clearing of any existing, and it has the solar could be limited to a maximum of 40% of the total area of the parcel. If we went down to 10%, you would not want much more. For instance, this could, if you had a 10% limit, then this should go down to perhaps 15%. But if we don't do that percent and we try to keep it in line with the farm viability ordinance, this section would have to relate back to the decision we make on the other one. So it may not be a percent, but we'll have to look at this in whoever is going to make suggestions to number 11 on the previous page would also want to keep this paragraph in mind, that we don't leave it to 40%, that it's a different number. That's all.
Oh, is it number 13?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you jumped ahead a little bit.
Yeah, number 13 on that, yeah.
So, anyway, any questions on the first paragraph on the land clearing and environmental cultural impact?
Yes.
Okay.
While I have it, can I just say there's a typo on purposed with a D? You need to kill the D. Fourth line from the bottom of the first paragraph.
Oh, yeah.
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 Yes, line 7, in that first paragraph, I think, line 7, it says, "to the greatest extent practical." On line, yeah, it's, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. To the greatest extent practical. Maybe you should add that a leveling plan must be approved by the planning board prior to implementing leveling techniques. And also, line 10, where it says no blasting will be conducted on the parcel. The question is, how will the ground be leveled without blasting? How are you going to know? That's why I said if they had a leveling plan, it should be in there, so. Well, they have to say what they were going to do. The developer needs to tell you how he's going to level the land. If it has to be leveled as much as possible for the panels to be on there.
Would that concern be dealt with in the development plan review, Al or Jim? I'm not sure.
Could be.
I'm not.
It's written in the ordinance. I mean, there's ways around that for a developer, very easy ways if they really want to alter their land. They could do that before they even come to the planning board. There's nothing really we can do to stop them. We wouldn't even know it happened. But I would say that most solar developers are not going to want to alter the land
any more than they
have
have
to. It costs money, and they're going to generally follow the contour of the land as it says in the ordinance.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns from the council on the first paragraph there? Okay. The next paragraph containing the percentage, I guess, Sylvia, do you want to?
It just has to match page 4, number 13.
Yeah, that'll go back to 13.
Okay. So everybody's okay with that? Yeah. Oh,
It'll have
Kevin.
to change.
Yes, Al.
We'll probably have to rework that too, because I think when the planning board was coming up with that 40% number,
yeah,
they were thinking about that in tandem
with
the previous page,
correct.
Yeah,
which applies only in those instances where the property is rezoned. So for commercial and manufacturing, when you can cover 75%, you're certainly going to want to clear more than 40.
Right.
So I think that's probably, we probably didn't fully flesh this out here, but that paragraph here should apply only in instances where you're rezoning. And again, it probably should be dropped down to closer to 15 if you're going to change it to 15. So you probably should preface that 40%
Yep.
with in instances
Where it's rezoned.
Where it's rezoned.
Right.
Then it makes more sense.
Okay. All right. And you're good with that, Al, too?
That was my comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll make that change, Jim. Kevin?
This isn't really a legal suggestion, but it's a practical suggestion just to try to save time. I've sat through a number of these hearings, both at the planning board and the council, and my understanding is that when a developer develops any solar project, they not only design the acreage upon which the solar panels will be sited, but they also have to cut trees in addition to that to make sure that the sun is available, in other words, to remove shading. So while the previous page we were talking about lot coverage, which the acreage involved with siting the panels themselves, I think this one probably doesn't necessarily have to be the same percentage or the same acreage as that number, because I think there are many instances where the developer, while they have to clear land where they won't be putting panels on it, but they'll have to clear some trees so that they don't shade the panels that are installed. So I don't think that has to be a perfect match. I'm just trying to, unless I'm wrong about that understanding, I think I just want to put it out there for some thought, that's all.
Jim, you have any?
That's a good comment.
Yeah.
You can keep that number at 40, okay, and just preface it by, in instances where a zone is changed from RFRA to commercial for solar purposes, that you can't clear any more than 40% of it, for any reason, even for shading purposes. Because you're only, if you're going down to 15, if you're going down to 15 coverage, I don't think you should have to clear any more than 40%. I would think.
Okay. What does the council feel on that, Sylvia?
We're going to need to come up, with some language that will correspond to the farm viability ordinance, and only for rezoned properties we're talking about here. The 40%, so we're going to have to massage that section.
Do you have any verbiage suggestions, Jim?
Well, I think both ordinances need work.
Yeah.
For example, when you look at the farm viability ordinance, and Frank, you've pointed this out in the past, okay, is that the difference between an intermediate
And a large farm
and a
is the
large
same.
farm is only in terms of the number of dollars that they generate.
Right.
Okay?
On the Schedule
If
F.
you get- Right, on $2,500 versus $10,000,
yeah.
okay? In terms of the size, so in other words, if you're only generating $2,500, you can have an acre. If you generate 10,000, you can have 2 acres of solar, okay? And then to get to 3 acres, you have to have a 50-acre parcel. So I think that needs work, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So my suggestion would be clearing of any existing vegetation on the subject parcel for the purpose of constructing, operating, and maintaining a PSES shall be determined by the planning board review, limited to a maximum of 40% of the total area of the parcel.
It still wouldn't work for commercial manufacturing, but it's good. I think you still have to preface it like we did on the previous page, in instances where a zone is changed. And I think that takes care of it.
So why don't we do that? Yes.
Just on that same paragraph, the last sentence, the PSES and equipment shall not have a significant impact upon the soils, water resources, air quality, etc. What's the definition of significant?
A little vague, general.
Adverse impact. Broad.
So, isn't cutting thousands of trees down significant?
Well, yeah, we know. But we're amending the ordinance, we're going page by page. We're just trying to make sure that it's fluid from page to page here. There's a lot of things to consider. Jim, do you think if we just put in there, I guess relative to zone changes, we'd be okay, or I don't know, or do you think we still need more work on it?
Well, I don't think in any instance you want a significant impact. You could probably say significant, shall not have a significant adverse impact.
There you go.
That's a little stronger. And again, I think you have to look at these things on a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
Locational specific. Where are the wetlands, where are the rivers?
Right.
Somehow in black and white, before the planning department says yes. I mean, you sort of like after the fact. You need to hem them in more.
Well, I mean, I think there are other aspects of this ordinance that prevent adverse impacts, okay? For example, containment. In this ordinance, we've embedded containment for liquids that might be in...
Sediment controls.
Yeah, so I think that's just a broad stroke statement expressing the intent of the town, that they want those things protected. But I think there's more concrete things throughout the ordinance that would serve to achieve that.
Sometimes giving the planning board a little more flexibility, I think, gives them more control. the more you try to control it specifically, you take away the control. You give the control back to the developer because they can say, well, this is exactly what I'm doing. I would like to see more flexibility given to our own planning board because they can make changes then, and they have more room to make change. And if you really make your document so specific, you have nowhere to go. And invariably, something is going to occur that you're really not going to like.
Okay. All right.
I like what Barbara had, significant adverse.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Scott, you good?
Significant adverse, but then you could always debate whether significant adverse is. Sharon, would you read what you said, please?
Well, what I really wanted was some way to quantify what the planning board or anybody thinks significant is. You know, I just, and plus you're just saying it.
Well, if you go through
It's
the...
like after the fact, it just sounds after the fact rather than.
Well, you know, usually if you look at the town charter, it always uses language like the health and welfare of the community, and I would assume that the planning board would use that type of criteria in making a decision. That would be considered adverse in my view. What I'm looking forward to is empowering the planning board, which seems to have been stifled as of late. Thank you.
All right, so, all right, I think we okay with that, I think, Jim?
Yeah.
Move forward, okay. Last couple sentences on page 5. Any questions on that? Okay, page 6. There's numerous, looks like cultural impacts. I'll start with the top, the applicant through the use of soil erosion and sediment control plans. Any questions on that paragraph? Okay. Next is clear existing vegetation from area. Any questions, concerns on that paragraph? Okay.
I'm sorry. Well, simple one, the next to the last line, where it says granted by the public utility at the appropriate time, which is at, I think those words need to be deleted, and it just goes from granted by the public utility at the completion of the construction of the project, if that's what you really meant. And I don't really like that time.
I think Sharon's right.
I don't know when they're approved by the public utility. I think it maybe is at the end of the construction. So I think leaving the planning board the appropriate discretion with appropriate time is fine. That's my thoughts on it.
Well, but then you also say which is at the completion, so you don't need that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, okay.
You just go right to the completion.
Oh, okay.
Oh, period at appropriate time? Is that what you're saying?
At the completion.
That's
And
what
just,
you really meant.
Oh, okay.
Jim, any thoughts on that change? Skipping at the appropriate time and just going right to the...
Yeah, I think that's better language. That's
Okay.
better English, yeah.
All right. All right. Yeah.
Were you done with that paragraph?
No, I want to know, which says just above that, the third line from the bottom there, it says, receiving a determination from the public utility that the proposed project is feasible, as well as an assurance from the public utility that interconnection approval will be granted. And I guess I need input from the public utility of what is reasonable to expect. You know,
Again, I'm going with the criteria from the utilities.
The public utility has to give them the proposed project. The public utility has to say it's feasible, and it has to give them an assurance that they can tag into the line, that they will take the power, the 11.5 watts, whatever, megawatts. They have to give permission and an assurance that they will be able to go into the grid. before they do any clearing. It is what it says.
They're going to receive a determination. They're not going to necessarily receive.
The second is approval. No, they don't get an approval.
No.
Can you guys use the microphone?
The assurance. They get a determination that the proposed project is feasible. Then they also get an assurance from the public utility that the interconnection approval will be granted. Those are two separate issues. One, it's feasible, public utility says, yeah, it's probably okay. And two, now we'll actually connect you. And there's two different things that need to be done before they do clearing of existing vegetation. The public utility doesn't grant, and the final approval is granted at the completion of the project.
Okay, thanks. Barbara? All right, any further questions, concerns on that paragraph? Okay, next is the tribal cultural impacts paragraph.
I'd like this whole thing taken out. I think that you are mixing up public and private lands. I think that you're allowing both the federal National Register of Historic Places, where's that long one? The anti-THPO. You're allowing the feds on private land, not just on public land. I think this is a major problem. I would like the whole thing struck because it's going to affect anyone's property when you sell it, or if you want to use it for something, it will. This happens to be in the solar ordinance, but once you have installed it, I would assume that they can also say, well, you're selling your land. We want to check it for burials. We want to check it for stones. We want to check it. I would not do this. It's also a problem if indeed you are doing it on a solar, let's say it's a solar array on a piece of property. And when they do this, the tribe will say, oh yes, there are things on this property. So the solar doesn't go through. Okay, that's fine. Now they want to sell it for residential housing. You have the same problem. Now you have, well, we have special artifacts on this property that you now want to sell for houses or for commercial development or for a park. It's already been established and you're going to have to work around it. The costs are astronomical, and I also believe that once the feds are involved on private property, they can stop anything for as long as they want. And then it has to go through a whole different process because it's federal. I think this should be removed. I think it's a lovely idea. I think it's wonderful when the land trust and conservation get together and can say this piece of property is really valuable to us. I think that's great. But when you do it generically where everybody is in this together, the whole town, I think you have major problems. This whole area was tribal. Every single piece of property was tribal. I think it needs to be removed.
Yeah, I agree with Barbara. It's private property too, for the most part, or it is. And I experienced, and nothing against the tribe, I know Mr. Harris well, but it happened when the National Grid built their substation on 216. They found ceremonial stones there, and I'm pretty familiar with the owner of the land and what his experiences were there. So it wasn't a good situation. So I don't agree with this either. I think it should be stricken as well in the next paragraph too. So I just think it opens a can of worms that we probably don't need to have. No disrespect to the tribe. Any questions?
In recent history, there was a development on Lawton Foster North, and they were dividing some land into house lots, and there was some ceremonial rocks, I'll just leave it at that, and that they were identified, and And I believe the planning board was in support of that, of the protection of this area, and also the person who was subdividing. So maybe Al could provide some background. Well, I'm sure he could, but I thought it was something that was discovered, and it was going to be a development. People walked the property and they found these things. And so I support these two paragraphs for that reason. And I suppose I'm not sure it belongs here, it might be in another ordinance, but anyway, I have to seek cover from the planning board and find out. Maybe you could provide a little history. Does that sound true, about right? Didn't they find this and then they were required to protect it, I believe? It wasn't a property owner who said, I'll protect it. And maybe they did, but didn't you require that they protected it?
Yes, you are correct. In that instance, it was brought to the planning board's attention that there might be tribal considerations, and we pursued it. The property owner was very cordial and decided to embrace it. But I have to say that in all my experience, there have only been a couple of those. We don't require this in the subdivision regulations. Tribal inspections are not required, and I have to profess that while initially I thought this was a good idea, I hear Barbara's concerns. If somebody decided, if the town council decided to keep this in, I would only request that you require the owner to sign off on it so that the town or the planning board is not involved in any subsequent mess. If you'd like to strike it altogether, that's okay. I'll be okay with it.
Thanks, Al. I think that is good advice. Again, I'm not of the opinion to leave it in there, either paragraph. Scott, do you have any opinions, or you're good?
Well, as a historically minded person, a lot of historical sites do get obliterated, but you also have to have progress. I'm really flexible on it. I understand, I have a high regard for Al Diario's remarks and recommendation, and I do respect the planning board, and I think they should get more respect, certainly generally as a general statement. I wrestle with this because I've been very involved in town history through the years. At the present time, I will say that I will keep it in. I'm flexible to take it out. I see when the final project is done, I might support taking it out. I have a high regard for Councilor Thompson's view. She grew up in this town. We're the only two people that grew up in town. Not that we're necessarily always right, but at the present time, I say keep it in, but I'm open to taking it out when we have the final vote. Thank you.
Well, we're trying to get to some kind of consensus, so, and move forward.
It's all right.
Yeah.
I defer
I
to
appreciate
Al.
Al's remarks, okay. Well, we're gonna strike the two paragraphs from, yeah. Yeah, it just, it's a difficult one.
When would you enforce it?
Yeah.
What part of the planning process would that take
So,
place?
yeah, all right. I think we're all on the same page. Okay, all right, thanks, folks. Okay, heard that, Jim, right? Okay. Next, the pertinent structures, bottom of page 6. Any questions on A and B there? Okay. Page 7. Top is C. It begins with screen shall consist of deer-resistant shrubbery. Was that plastic trees? Is that what that is? I'm not sure what that deer is. Okay.
Yeah, right, plastic.
A little joke by me, no one got it, I guess. I'm not that funny, I guess. Funny looking, but that's about it. All right, any questions on that paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It was brought up at the previous hearing, and Where it says that the visual screen shall be maintained in a manner consistent, no, it's not there. It's the last sentence, the addition where it says, all plants and other material used for screening should be no less than 6 feet in height. I understand why we want that, but I would like to add a sentence that states that, in addition, the planning board may require understory, and I just grabbed that word because that's been used by the developer, but what it would allow is the planning board to decide that, yes, we want them to be 6 feet, but we also want some bushes, maybe between, but I leave that up to the planning board, so I would just put in that sentence that they may be, the planning board may require an understory or different language if you prefer.
Okay, any other questions or comments on letter C on top of page 7?
I think that it all should be high, so you can see.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, she thinks it all should be high, but we got to put a specified, no less than 6 feet is in there, so.
Generally, they're going to plant things that are no less than 6 feet, but it's going to go in a gradiated pattern so that you have the taller ones and then you want to fill in with smaller, like rhododendrons, mountain laurels, things that are indigenous to a forest environment. They don't all come at 6 feet. Most of your bushes and plants, your barberries and things like that, are going to be smaller. So I think we need to be able to allow the landscape designer and the planning board to have some flexibility to determine what that masking will become.
But the planning board is the one who said they wanted 6 feet minimum, if I remember, at one of those meetings. So I don't think it should be anything less.
So that's up to planning board?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to get at, I think what Barbara's trying to get at is the minimum, like say arborvitae's be at 6 feet, because some of the projects in town have arborvitae's that are like 2 feet. And by the time we're old and gray, they might be 4 feet. But I think, to Barbara's point, in between, the taller 6-foot plantings, some cover. I think that's what she's speaking of, that would eventually grow over time. I think that's what you were speaking about. Any other?
I wasn't suggesting that they're not at 6 feet. You leave the 6 foot. I was just suggesting another sentence which allows the planning board to tell the developer, okay, it's 6 feet, but you also have to do some understory, so they put in some bushes. That's all.
Okay. So is that okay to add that? But I know, Sharon, you want the understory to be 6 feet.
Only if the planning board.
Yeah, at the discretion of the board. Any question, Al, any?
I thought you wanted everything at least 6 feet.
As far as the buffering around the project, planting, the vegetative buffer. Or on top of page 7C, letter C.
I'm not sure understory comes at 6 foot height.
No.
I know. It eventually could, but.
So generally, the primary specimen vegetation comes in at 6 feet.
Right.
For lighting, et
Right.
cetera. I think what's being recommended is the fill-in material.
Right.
Be added.
In between.
Not at 6 feet.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we'll add that piece of, I guess, fill-in that Sylvia suggested. Okay, section D, any equipment that utilizes fluid shall be outfitted with a containment mechanism sufficient to contain at least 125% of the said fluid and prevents said fluid contact with the ground. Any questions, concerns on that? That's a revision. Okay. Next is lighting and signage. Number 3A, any questions there? 3B? 3C. Next is planning board review, section D. Looks like, yeah, first paragraph, the prospective owner of the proposed PSES. Next, everything else has been stricken. Next is, looks like number 2. No, new number 1. Okay. Any questions on that paragraph? Okay. Bottom of page 7, number 2. Barbara?
Can we strike, if possible, the very last 2 words? All historic, solar arrays cannot be established in historic districts. All historic views from historic properties must be considered and saved, period.
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right, so that's 4 yeses, 5 yeses. Okay. All right, page 8, folks. A lot of stricken verbiage up top. Number 1 on the site control, the applicant shall submit. Any questions on that paragraph? Number 2, operation and maintenance plan.
The last sentence in the first paragraph, it says the applicant shall maintain a current phone number and identify a responsible person for the public to contact with inquiries and complaints throughout the life of the project. And so should we not allow them to sell their development to another developer? I mean, what happens when the project is sold? That's my question. Are you going to get the new phone numbers, et cetera?
And so it should be the applicant and his assigns. Add the additional word, the applicant and Kevin, is it and his assigns? And his successors. So the applicant and his successors shall maintain.
But why should we allow them to sell?
I'm sorry.
Do you want that suggested change in terms of okay, its successors, okay. You guys have any questions on that? Okay, William. Yes.
There are companies that exist all around and in every state. There are national companies that buy these up, and that's all they do is run these systems and do everything that is required of them. So that you don't always hear a developer say, oh, by the way, I'm going to stay there. In these instances, they do it, it's done, and they sell it to somebody, a company that manages it. So, I mean, I know they do that, and I think everybody else does. But I wanted to point out the last sentence that you read. The applicant shall maintain a current phone number and identify a responsible person for the public to contact. It should be the town. So I'm glad you had us look at that paragraph, so you should change that to town.
And its successors thing, should that also be in that 3rd paragraph? The owner, throughout the life of the project, the owner of the PSES will provide copies of all correspondence with, and its successors.
Okay. Next, says no chemicals, solvents. I guess any questions on that? That's an add. Says, let me just read the change, suggested change. No chemicals, solvents, or herbicides, excluding water, will be used in operation and maintenance of the PSES. Throughout the life of the project, the owner of the PSES will provide copies of all correspondence with federal and state agencies pertaining to the project permits and regulatory requirements. Any questions on, and its successors on that too? Okay. Okay. Number 3, landscape plan. Any questions, concerns about that new verbiage? Al, I just had a quick question on that section. I know you've mentioned in the past about projects that have come before the planning board without, I don't know if they were not licensed or something. You made reference to that. Was it was it regarding the landscape folks, or was it someone else in that group that, I knew you'd mentioned it was kind of like the Wild Wild West. I don't know if you quite made that reference, but it was something, was it someone that came before the planning board that wasn't potentially licensed that was a concern, and I think that's why this was added? I'm not sure if that's correct or not. Maybe you can speak to the reason that...
Pretty close, yeah. So I did make a Wild West comment, but that was actually addressed thoughtfully on page 7, Planning Board Review D, new 1. The concern there was that we are seeing applications that have information represented on them that people are just pulling out of thin air, and nobody's being responsible for it, and the planning board has to make decisions based on it. That's inappropriate. So that's been addressed here in this revision. We don't have any concerns about the landscape plans that have been submitted to the planning board so far.
They weren't landscape, or were they landscape folks, or they were engineering?
It was engineering related. And it's only because until they start buckling down with development plan review, they're just using information from available sources. It's the cheapest way to do business. We want to make sure that it's okay to use an economically viable piece of information, but somebody has to be responsible for it.
Thank you, Al. You guys have any questions on bottom of page 8, landscape plan? Okay, page 9. Starts with including temporary or permanent roads or driveways. Any questions on that? Suggested changes? Okay. Next is landscape plan will specify a seed mixture. Any questions on that? Okay, number 4, as-built plan. Any suggested changes on that paragraph? Okay, financial security. The applicant shall establish and maintain a financial security instrument. Any questions on that?
Yeah, on the second paragraph, it says, the applicant shall submit a fully inclusive estimate of the costs associated with removal prepared by a qualified engineer. And my question is, we should have it and verified by our town engineer, or double checked. Whatever their estimate is, we need to know for ourselves whether that's an accurate estimate.
I believe the planning board does that regularly. But having it written in is not a bad idea.
And verified by Crossman Engineering? Yeah, okay. I got that, Jim? You guys okay with that to my right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So the amount of last sentence, the amount of security shall be based on the estimated cost of removal at the end of the useful life of the facility as determined by the planning board's review, planning board's consultant. Yeah? Okay. As determined by the planning board's consultant.
Okay. All right. Last paragraph in section 5, the applicant shall establish and maintain a general liability insurance. Any questions there? Sharon?
I just don't know why on the second line it says equipment and any access drives associated. I don't know what drives means there. So there should be driveway with an S.
Just call it a road.
Roads.
Access points.
Access roads.
Roads, okay. Okay. Section E, post PSES approval regulations, number 1, maintenance. Any questions on that first paragraph? The applicant shall submit an annual operation and maintenance report. Next is the applicant shall maintain a PSES in a neat, clean, and operable manner. Any questions there? Okay. Page 10. Site access shall be maintained to a level acceptable by the fire chief and emergency medical services. Next paragraph, applicant shall be responsible for the cost of maintaining the PSES and the access roads, public right-of-ways. Okay, number 2, abandonment, absent notice. Any questions there? Fails to operate in more than 1 year, it's considered abandoned. Second paragraph, any PSES that's been, yep.
The second paragraph at the top about, the applicant. Is there a way, they'll be responsible for the cost of repairing any damage occurring as a result of operation and construction? But what about if there's a storm, or is that considered operation? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, second paragraph under abandonment, any questions there? Okay. Decommissioning, number 3, any questions on that? Shall include the total removal of the PSES, including any underground and above-ground utility structures and any other associated facilities, and cleaning and restoration of the site. All right, 3A, if decommissioning is not complete within 180 days, any questions there? Okay. 3B, if the decommissioning has not been completed within 30 days, written notice by the town. Okay. Number 4, removal requirements. First paragraph on the PSES is scheduled to be decommissioned. Any questions there? Okay. 4A, physical removal of all solar energy panels, mounting systems, structures and equipment, security batteries, transmission lines, including below-grade foundation, transmission lines, and other structures. Very straightforward. 4B, disposal of all solid and hazardous waste in accordance with local and state disposal regulations. C, stabilization and or revegetation of the site. D, 4D, any earth disturbance as a result of the removal of the system shall be graded and reseeded. Okay. Bottom of page 10, that's inspection, inspection and enforcement. The building and zoning official shall have the power to inspect.
I've got one.
Okay.
The last sentence, any entity who fails or refuses to adhere to all the provisions of this ordinance, and then I wanted to add, or any condition imposed by the town, state, or federal government shall be deemed in violation and liable to the town of Hopkinton. So is that after ordinance? You want me to say it again? After provisions of this ordinance or any condition imposed by the town, state, or federal government. That was what I wanted to add.
State meaning DEM?
The state means everything in the state, and DEM or water resources or who knows.
Town, state, what's the last word?
Imposed by the town, state, or federal government. That could be EPA, who knows?
To applicable agencies within the federal and state government.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You guys get that? You guys get that to my left? Yes, Bill.
Just a comment on the F, inspection enforcement. In addition to the building zoning official. In addition to the building and zoning official, would you also want to add the town's engineering consultants there?
Yep.
Because sometimes that's beyond the scope of the building official.
Yes.
Town engineering consultant? The town's engineering consultant, or something to that effect. Because we don't have a town engineer.
You got that, Jim?
I do.
Okay. All right, that's bottom of page 10. Okay. All right, page 11. top says to the town of Hopkinton for penalties not to exceed $500 a day. Any questions there?
I don't need the mic. I'd just like to change it to 2,000 because some of these they're making a great deal of money and they may decide that I don't care about 500, I can still make more money. So I'd just like to see the violation amount be increased to 2,000, and that's just an arbitrary number.
Well, and I understand why you'd want to raise it, but the zoning violation is $500 a day. That's what we got currently now. That's why that's there. So
you don't think we can change it?
oh, we can, but that's where the 500 came from.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with the 2,000.
I would be in favor of raising that. I mean, basically, these people have serious money, and if you really want somebody to do something, to compel somebody to do something, a $500 per day for one of these big solar people is just, you know, it's like getting a parking ticket for $5 or $10. I mean, it's not going to really impact those people. So I'd go for 2,000 a day, and it still probably wouldn't hurt them. So let's milk them for what we can. Thank you.
Yes.
The town manager and I have just been talking about this. One of the reasons I think that the zoning ordinances violations are capped at 500 is because that's also the difference in criminal law between something that's a misdemeanor moving up into a felony. Those numbers are not really random. They kind of have a global significance in the law. And then there's concepts of constitutional law that come into play here, due process and equal protection and so forth. Speaking for myself, certainly, I'm extremely uncomfortable with going over a penny over $500 because I think it's inviting, I could think of a smarter lawyer than I can come up with about 10 different ways to challenge this legally and create a series of fits. I don't think it would be enforceable over 500 is the bottom line. So I don't think that's a good idea for legal reasons.
I'd also like to respond. And I also think the problem, I would stay with 500 also, because we're saying any entity who fails or refuses to adhere, they may not be refusing to adhere, but they may have a tornado. And they have nothing to do with the tornado or the hurricane or taking something out. And so they are not refusing and they are failing, but it's not going to be their fault and anyone will sue us up one side and down the other. I want to stay at 500.
First of all, I don't like the terminology, and I'm not a lawyer, but I understand the law a little bit. It says for penalties not to exceed. I think the penalty should be $500. If that is the limit that we can get, $500 isn't going to hurt these people, so make them pay the full $500 not to exceed. Don't delete the language not to exceed 500. Make it $500, and it's not going to hurt them any more than somebody gets a parking ticket for $10 or $15 and they're making over 100 grand a year. That's not going to impact them at all. So I would like to strike not to exceed $500 and just have just $500 per day. What?
Okay. The solicitor.
Again, I'm sorry to be the skunk at the garden party here, but the municipal court jurisdiction, I think, is capped at $500 as well. So these fines are something that are subject to appeal and subject to judicial enforcement. And I don't think in every situation you take away from any judge the discretion to go a little easier on somebody because of perhaps extenuating circumstances such as illness or any number of things. So I am, again, very uncomfortable with striking the not to exceed We have a municipal court judge who does a very fine job, and she's more than capable of calling that the right way, regardless of who sits in that position. So I don't want to be boring or too elaborate in terms of citing chapter and verse, but every bone in my body tells me that we need to keep that language in there, not to exceed.
I will yield on that, and I thank Kevin for that, but I think that the fact is, the sentiment in this town is that a lot of these people with solar are taking advantage of this town, and we want to keep on a very tight leash. It's like a mean dog, if you will, or a dog that you want to keep a check on. So that's what I'm thinking about. Maybe I shouldn't use that language, but I will yield to the lawyer. Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Thanks, Scott.
Sylvia's point. We currently have a solar developer working on a project in our town. He was cited in the city of Cranston. According to the guidelines, he was supposed to clear cut no more than 5 acres and then plant barriers to retain the water. Well, he went in, developed and clear cut 40 acres and caused a flooding issue. So a $500 fine to him is, thank you very much. I saved a ton of money by clear cutting 40 acres. To their point, if we don't monitor this, and we can have a phone number to call, but I don't know who is going to monitor these solar developers into doing the right thing. They could go in there and blast one day and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that.
Well, yeah, right, Joe. I think we also have inspection processes throughout the project and afterwards. Sylvia, I don't know if it's once a month or once a month. So I think that can be avoided, Joe. Unlike what happened in Cranston. This is $500 per day, and it's important that anything over that's a felony, so it gets into a kind of a sticky wicket, as according to Kevin. So I think we should probably leave it in. But
Do restraining orders too. Well, I mean, you can go to court to stop somebody.
Yeah, cease and desist orders. Yeah.
I'm just going to go to the next paragraph for a minute. The next paragraph, does the town's engineer or designer shall inspect the PSES at the expense of the applicant on a monthly basis? I'd like to see that as a weekly basis rather than monthly, because I think a great deal can happen in 1 month, and if it's in 7 days, I think we have a better shot. If they could check it every Friday and make sure that it's going exactly as it's supposed to happen, especially during construction, and then during the month of April each year after completion. But I'd like to see monthly change to weekly, because that is certainly a problem, and it's better to catch it early than late.
I agree.
Okay. So that whole, I think that whole next paragraph that Barbara alluded to, it was added. I assume everyone's got a copy of that, but yeah, is everybody to my right okay with that?
Yeah.
Suggested change from monthly to weekly, Scott? Okay. Jim, you got that? Okay. All right. Section G, adoption. That's about it there, so, okay. I think that's it. Okay. All right, so we've gone through the whole ordinance and all the suggested changes, and we've made revisions. Where do we sit, I guess, do we? No, I know that. I guess we still want to try and continue or close? What do you?
Well, I want to make, I would like to hear the.
No, I know that, I know,
I
but.
am certainly anyone who I'd like to continue, and we made a lot of changes. I'd like to see them in full, have a hearing, so that we can still discuss it if necessary, and then it should be finished.
Okay.
But I definitely think we should continue.
Well, you can think on it. Okay. Yeah.
As pointed out earlier by the president, if we don't close this hearing tonight and we drag this on, well, if we don't close it tonight, we have another meeting, it just allows more proposals to come in. And yeah, we can say no to the proposals, but we have to have hearings and we have to follow the law. But if we get this done, it's going to make it perfectly clear to developers going forward that they've got to change things. So if they really want to get something done, it's not going to be as easy as before. So I'd like to see us close it tonight, because when we make our decision, we'll have it in front of us. We will have already reviewed all the changes we suggested tonight, and any more from the public. And at that time we make our decision, we can also discuss amongst ourselves and come to a good decision on this. So I'm all in favor of closing it. The sooner the better, so that we have no more proposals coming in. Or if they come in, they've got to adhere to this.
Frank, can I just say something?
Yeah.
There's a very simple, and I agree with what you're saying, there's a very simple way to stop this. The planning board reviews it, they issue an adverse opinion on this project, they reject the project, it goes to the town council, you review it, make sure there aren't any errors, you reject it based on the fact it's not consistent with our comprehensive plan. End of conversation.
It's not that simple, Joe. I wish it was.
It is that simple.
No,
We
it
had
isn't.
5 hearings for Alton Bradford, we had 4 hearings for Brushy-Brook. The reason why it's not that simple is that there are 3 people on the council that want this residential.
So we're not going to get into prior projects, current projects. I understand where you're coming from, but it's not that simple. I think we've gotten a long way in terms of revising this ordinance, and it's been great. I think everybody's on the same page. It's greatly going to reduce projects going forward. But again, if we don't close it, and we're 1 meeting away from enacting these suggested changes, 1 meeting.
I agree. A lot of
so.
work has been done on this.
But
I
it,
agree with Bob. What's the rush? We can stop anything coming.
no, I know, but as Sylvia pointed out, statutorily we have to go through all the hearing processes. But I think we're all on the same page for the most part on all these suggested changes, and we're 1 meeting away from enacting this. So I think it's important to close it and move forward to greatly restrict what we're trying to do.
The town council could stop.
I realize, Joe. I know. Okay.
Question?
Yes, Carol.
So if you close it now, and there was some disagreement in what the limitations were going to be, 3 acres, 10%, 15%. If you close it now, what is that limit going to be?
That gets decided when we make our decision.
Right.
But the public
Yeah.
has no opinion.
Yeah. So I think we've.
Cannot speak again.
Well, right.
Speak tonight.
So basically we close it, and then we ultimately, all of us would decide with the suggested changes. So, all right, so next is public comment, I guess. So if you have a question about a specific page, I need you to mention the page, the number, and tell me what you suggest we do with that particular page and number. Eric.
Okay, can you hear me? Eric Bibler. Okay. Wow, we've come a long way tonight. I'm amazed. I didn't expect this. It's caused me to change what I want to say. And I have some documents that I want to put on the record, but I'm going to refer to them. I may need to refer to them, so I'm going to hold on to them for now. I do want to say to the town council that I do think I do have some specific items, but I also think it's really important to think about the larger perspective of where we've come from and where we've gotten to on this ordinance. And I don't think that we can say enough that, we do have a comprehensive plan. One of the planning board members has said on numerous occasions to developers as they came in that, Hopkinton is defined as a rural residential community with limited commercial space, and that's by design. In our comprehensive plan, which I've read every word of several times, clearly the paramount objective of the comprehensive plan is to preserve the rural character of Hopkinton, and that runs through every section of the plan, whether it's housing or commercial development, clustering these developments. That's the overriding concern. So the other thing that has come out this hearing and other hearings is that 90% of the land approximately in Hopkinton is RFR 80, where all commercial activity is strictly prohibited. And then we do have, as I said, limited commercial space, and it tends to be clustered around Hope Valley, Exit 1 and Exit 2. All right, so I think we have to keep that in mind when we are considering this ordinance. That this ordinance, as I believe Sharon noted, is, first word in it is non-residential. And in the definitions of what a photovoltaic system is for the purpose of this ordinance, and what the purpose is, it's non-residential, it's commercial. This is the generation of electricity for sale, for profit, right? That's an activity that is strictly prohibited in RFR 80 parcels. The purpose of the ordinance, which is important, is to promote the safe and effective use, to regulate it, and to provide standards of placement. Okay. Now, this is where I would depart with some of the comments of Jim Lamper, our town planner, when he said, look, this ordinance doesn't have anything to do with zoning, whether or not to rezone property. And the reason I disagree with that, and I think that I actually think that, I just want to back up and I say, I give this town council a lot of credit right now for having heard your constituents, having listened, and this has been an odyssey for all of us. Not just the people in this room, but also the people sitting at the table here. And it's my belief, I can't know what's inside all of your minds, but it's my belief that this town council thought they had a good idea, which was to encourage some of this development of these large industrial installations, and that would improve our revenue, and improve our financial situation. And the thought at the time was, the mind of the constituents wasn't necessarily known or appreciated. And the thought was, well, if we do this right and we do this carefully, we can accomplish that. And there have been several comments about on the early projects how nobody showed up, nobody objected, nobody complained, and that was interpreted as agreement, which it turns out wasn't necessarily true because people were getting up the learning curve. So where I take issue is, it was my belief until I would say even tonight that the purpose of this ordinance, because these solar arrays, these ground-mounted solar arrays that are commercial and are industrial, they're massive. And the purpose of this ordinance, to me, and I wrote this in correspondence to you yesterday, reflected the sentiments that were in the town council workshop of 2 years ago, January 9th, 2017, where the stated purpose was a workshop was held to discuss options relative to commercial solar arrays on appropriate parcels of land zoned RFR 80. And I think this is important. I'm almost done with this, historical perspective, but I think it's important. And then at that meeting, the workshop had been scheduled, it said, to discuss options including but not limited to possible application of planned unit development ordinance and other potential vehicles that the town might consider in facilitating developers, property owners wanting to consider installing commercial solar arrays on appropriate parcels of land zoned RFR 80. Then this went on to say there was a program that was prescribed, discussed, and virtually agreed to by the town council. The step one was complete and adopt a solar ordinance to regulate commercial solar arrays on commercial and manufacturing zone property. But that's after you're in this workshop to figure out how to free RFR 80 land for that purpose for people that want to do it. Sorry. And then further step was to determine the best way for the town to allow commercial solar farms in RFR 80 zones, and after decommissioning to retain the RFR designation and revert back to residential. Now that was the old plan. That was the plan that was being pursued this entire year, this idea of automatic reversion. We need the space, and there's only one place to get it, and that's on this residential property. Now that's what's got all these people in this room excited, certainly me and everyone else, because we kind of glossed over the fact that there's a direct conflict between wanting to be a rural residential community and having that land zoned as an outright prohibition against commercial and industrial activity, and then trying to figure out how to rezone it and make it commercial and industrial without reference to a larger planning process like the comp plan. All right, so I'm done with that. But with that in mind, and with this ordinance, I want to say a couple of other things. Previously, this is meant to set some standards. Well, for this entire year, the standard for placement, which is one of the items in this ordinance, the standard for appropriate placement of these facilities, these industrial facilities, has been wherever the town council decides to do it. Now, we've had 5 adverse opinions from the planning board and 1 tie on these large industrial projects. And I'm not trying to beat up on the town council, but I think it has to be said that in the hearings for Maxon Hill, Woodville, Alton, and Brushy Brook, which are now closed, not once has the town council ever acknowledged, mentioned, read, discussed any point of the opinion of the planning board. It was treated as a complete irrelevancy. And since they own this process of determining the propriety, the consistency with our plan of these projects, that had people very scared. So what I would say about this ordinance is that, first of all, I would not support 10% on a conversion of RFR 80 land. Because if I live in Hopkinton and I'm here because it's rural and residential, and that's what the comprehensive plan says, and I'm in my residential neighborhood and there's a 100-acre parcel across the street, 10 acres, 15 acres is a gigantic industrial solar, commercial solar installation, and I didn't buy in for that. I don't think it should be allowed, because I don't think the town council should be approving these conversions for even a 3-acre lot. But I think that the appropriate percentage should be something like 3%, which is basically what the farm viability ordinance provides. If it's 50 acres, you can do 1.5. If it's over 50 acres, you can do 3 acres. I think 3% would be tolerable, but just barely, because I can imagine people in this room, if they live across the street from Skunk Hill Road or the Woodville Alton Road project or whatever, they don't want to look at 3 acres of solar panels either, because that destroys their residential neighborhood. So I want to make that point. I want to reiterate, I don't know that it was Barbara's point, but this idea of the decibels, it cannot just be based on some model. It's very easy to cheat on all these, modeled rather than actual decibels, and it should be ongoing. They're having a huge problem on Cape Cod right now where the installations get noisier over time. So 5 years into it, it can be a lot louder and a lot more annoying. So I think that standard should be applied and should be actual over time. Let's see. Then the other thing I want to say, and I think this is there's 2 other things I want to say, but I think the most important one is this. And I think Joe Moreau alluded to it, but I just want to make a very clear distinction. So this ordinance is a great idea, okay? It's not a great idea if it's a backdoor Trojan horse, way to, we've already predetermined that we're going to try to convert some of this residential land, so now let's put some rules in place. But it is a great idea to have this regulation. But this ordinance, the purpose of the ordinance is going to be to regulate these projects appropriately. And the town planner's been asking for that, and the planning board's been asking for that, and everybody wants that. But here is the distinction. Joe said it. You can't apply these regulations to projects that have already applied for their petitions, right? But you don't have to approve them either, right? So you don't have to state in your determinations for Atlantic Solar or Skunk Hill or Lisa Lane or Brushy Brook You don't have to say, I'm not going to approve this because it's more than 3%.
Let's not get to specific names.
No, I'm speaking generally, those are the 4 that are grandfathered. Those are the 4 industrial-sized projects that are grandfathered. I'm not talking about any specific one. Those are on the calendar. But all you need to do, honestly, is if you really want to support, and if you want to hear what your constituents are telling you, and you want to be consistent with what they want, and you want to be consistent with your own planning board, is to say, every one of those, the planning board disapproved this project. The planning board said this is not consistent with our comprehensive plan. The planning board said this is not in the best interests of our community. The planning board said this is not fair to the people who live in close proximity to this project. So I have said over and over again, and I think it's very simple, that when these projects come to the town council, instead of talking about the stormwater management plan and how many trees and what kind of trees are you going to plant, what size is the fence, you're really putting the cart before the horse. It should be very simple. You get together, you've got a recommendation from the planning board, they know what they're doing, they did a ton of work, right? You just look at that recommendation and say, they said no, they disapproved it, and they cited 2, 3, 4, 5 aspects of the comprehensive plan that it would violate. So all we really appropriately need to do here as a town council is to ask ourselves, did they get it right? Is there any reason for this town council to believe that the planning board got it wrong? And I believe that you actually have the responsibility, if you are going to override your own planning board that you've delegated this responsibility to, each one of you should be willing to state in public, I disagree with the planning board's assessment. I disagree with item 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in their opinion. You should read their opinion in public for the public record, and then you should address it, and you should justify yourselves. And if you disagree and you're going to overturn them, you should be prepared to defend it, and you should give your own interpretation of why they got the question of whether it's consistent with the comprehensive plan incorrect. So I'm making the distinction between regulation, I'm almost done, regulation and approval. You don't need any permission from any word in this ordinance to do that process appropriately. And then the final thing, and I'm going to give you this document, is you've come a lot further in our direction, meaning 90% of the people in this room than I ever thought you would. I really hope you'll consider 3%. There is a, under the home charter for the town, under section 3, I think, or article 3, which is under legislature, there's a provision for referendum. There's a provision for referendum and initiative. And it's an open question, but we do have 513 people now that felt strongly enough about this to sign a petition. And if this ordinance is permissive, what I had been prepared, if this ordinance had been tonight at a 30% or 15% or even 10%, honestly, ratio, if we're contemplating 10 acres of solar panels on a residential RFR 80 parcel, I believe that this group will be willing to go knock on doors and collect. What you need is 5% of the electors to bring an ordinance to rescind your ordinance and to bring a new ordinance to the town council. And that's about 325 or 30 voters. And it's 650 to then call a special town meeting. So, I hope we don't come to that, because what we'd rather do is work with you. But there's always that option, if this is going to sacrifice the rural character of the town, I think people might take matters into their own hands.
If anybody has any questions on the ordinance that we went over tonight, please come up. let us know what page and what number you have a question on, and we'll allow your input. Oh, one second, yeah, Sherry.
Ladies first?
Yeah, Sherry, I saw her first. Sherry, just let us know what page and number.
Sure, it's page two. Okay, under applicability. Okay, we'll start with the second sentence, and then it goes into the next sentence, which is where my question is. This ordinance applies to all PSES to be constructed after the effective date of this ordinance. PSES constructed prior to the effective date of this ordinance shall not be required to meet the requirements of this ordinance. I just have a question. Do prior, it says constructed. So, I'm hung up on the word constructed because things that are in the hopper, so to speak, are not constructed. So could it?
Yeah, if we close the hearing, set a date for decision, anything after that decision that comes into the town clerk's office will go under this ordinance. Anything prior to that does not. So I'm not sure, yeah, to answer your question, constructed, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe submissions, projects submitted to the town, maybe instead of constructed, I guess. Jim, any thoughts on Sherry's comment, or Al?
Yeah, point of order, it says constructed. I'm presuming that if this is passed, this applies to anything that has not been built.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I refer to the solicitor, but it says constructed.
Yeah, but I don't know, okay. Kevin, you want to weigh in on that? I'm not of that opinion, but, yeah, thanks, Sherry.
Well, there's no question that the proposed ordinance has that language referring to has been constructed. There's a general principle in the law that prohibits on constitutional grounds ex post facto laws, which means you can't retroactively pass an ordinance that adversely affects someone who has already obtained some rights to develop a project by beginning the process with the town, which usually starts with the filing of an application. So my thought is, again, without having spent a lot of time examining this language, this ordinance does include that language, constructed. I'm suggesting that that may not be enforceable, that we're talking about grandfathered rights, and the law takes a very strong bias against ex post facto laws on constitutional grounds that attempt to change the rules after someone has gone through the trouble of applying and putting together plans and so forth. So while this ordinance clearly has that language, well, I'm suggesting it's probably not enforceable. So it should be deleted if we want to comply to that. But if the town wants to take it, if the town council wants to put that in there, it's right to do so. I'm just suggesting that at best it's unenforceable.
Part B to that, I'm sorry, I should have said part B. Kevin, to your point there. Sorry, part B to that. I just wanted to ask for one more clarification on that. We're still in the same sentence I'm hung up on. I think to Jim's point, he mentioned that this ordinance is really for PSES that's already kind of landed in the approval zone. Certain projects that are still under review have not landed in here yet. So if they haven't landed in here yet, they're not constructed. That's all I wanted to add.
So
hung up on that language.
no, I know, Karen. We're going to try and work through it here. I guess, Kevin, you're of the opinion maybe to just remove that piece, or I don't know what the council thinks. Obviously, Sherry brings up a good point, but I think that anything that's been submitted to the clerk's office, under the current guidelines, has to be heard under those current guidelines. But maybe we can change that wording there to make it more, whatever's been submitted to the clerk's office. Yeah.
Can I follow up on that?
I've got a suggestion. I heard distinctly, Kevin, that you said probably. Can you further review this and let us know at the next meeting? Or, you know what I mean? Yeah.
I think that's actually a really good suggestion. We really need to know from Kevin on whether we should delete the sentence in its entirety so that it would read, the following requirements apply to photovoltaic solar energy systems whose main purpose is to generate energy for sale back into the energy grid system, and go straight to any upgrade, modification, or structural change that materially alters the size or placement, blah, blah, blah. It would take out the entire sentence on constructed if we need to.
What was your intent? Was your intent to be from the point, with construction in your mind?
My intent was, I was under the impression that anybody that submitted under the current guidelines would be under the current guidelines. Once the ordinance, and that's why we, at least from my perspective, I think the rest of the folks, that's why we want to close and set this hearing and conclude the hearing and set a date for a decision so that nothing else can be under the old guidelines.
But some of the projects have not been approved by the town council.
Right, yeah.
So, please don't dismiss me, Frank.
No, I'm not, just, I don't want to talk about specific projects,
Come on
but
up
yeah.
so we can hear you better.
So if the projects have not been approved by the town council yet, they're still in the hopper. Why couldn't that language be buttoned up so that this ordinance would apply to those? Because some of these might not get approved. I mean, I think that we all in this room can agree that there are a lot of concerns. This is a new phase. These solar farms and plants are showing up everywhere. And I have a lot of questions regarding this ordinance. We talked about selling them. Not everything will transfer, no matter what language you put in there. What's going to happen to the decommissioning of these if these farms and solar plants are sold? I mean, 1 year is a long time to leave that empty. I think that should be shortened. I mean, I think 4 months, if nothing's going on at that plant, that should send up some red flags. Also, who's responsible if any of the residents, me, if I have a problem with my well, if that catches on fire, if something happens in a hurricane or a lightning strike, who's going to be monitoring those containment facilities underneath? What happens if it gets striked and it doesn't go into containment? It shoots out. I mean, there are multiple, I could stand here for hours with the questions that I have, and I know that you don't want to hear it. But, I mean, this is serious, serious stuff that is affecting our lives and our livelihood. I mean, I really think we need to take pause here and make sure we've got other towns that are having big problems. A lot of them have put moratoriums on these. Maybe we should think about putting a moratorium on these until we get some more information, better knowledge. You might want to follow suit. Have any of you contacted any of the towns that have decided to put moratoriums on?
Can we deal with the ordinance? No, we have. I haven't, because I'm taking the solicitor's advice. He's already talked about it in another open session. We've already gone leaps and bounds beyond what a moratorium would ever do. We've greatly restricted. I thought we were moving in the right direction.
No, and I don't disagree with that, Frank, but
we can't go off on tangents on moratoriums or anything else. If you have any suggestive changes, like restricting the decommissioning process,
Excuse me, why
or
can't you have a
abandonment,
moratorium? Why can't you listen to that? Why can't you listen to
Can you just hold on a second?
No, that's what you should do.
I know, but we have to stick to the ordinance that we're trying to amend. If we go off on tangents, we'll be here all night. So
You know, some of your points about decommissioning and shortening the timeframe are great. So we'll take that, you know, whatever you suggest we do with the, you know, the amendments to the ordinance that we've discussed tonight are great. But we can't go off on, again, the decommissioning, with moratoriums and anything else. Just stick to the plan here and what suggested changes you want to make.
And I respect that, Frank, but I'm feeling a little frustrated because I have emailed the town council several times. You always say we can't ask questions. Where do I go to get,
Well, ask. If you have questions and concerns about any aspect of what we went over tonight.
I know. What about other questions I have? What about other concerns? I've emailed you, I haven't heard back.
Public forum.
How do I'm asking a simple question. How do I get my concerns to the town council and how do I get the answers to my questions?
You said you'd be emailing us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, this is the problem with having one microphone. Sorry.
I understand the concerns again, but tonight we're here to talk about the ordinance that we've wanted to greatly reduce because we've heard your concerns. So let's kind of stick to that. I guess, you know, if I didn't...
Do I have to call you?
If I haven't returned an email, you, Justin's pretty good. I mean...
What is your name, by the way? I don't even know your name.
It's Lauren.
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 That's your last name?
No, it's her first name.
What's your last name?
Turner Petruska.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, so Lauren, call me. My number, cell number's on the website. Call me, 524-2759. I'll be happy to talk to you anytime. I apologize if I didn't answer the emails. I'm usually pretty good with that. I do get a lot of them, but anyway. So do you have any other concerns or questions about the suggested changes in the ordinance? Yes.
Yeah, I have concerns on all of this. I think
this is your time. Tell us.
Like I said, mention the page and the item that you'd like to restrict or add to it, whatever.
I think 1 year is a long time.
What page is that, Lauren?
Now you put me on the spot, right?
Yes.
Abandonment.
Okay, then, yep. That's page 10, right?
So,
Yep.
absent notice of a proposed date of decommissioning of the PSPS shall be considered abandoned.
If it fails to operate more than 1 year. Yeah.
I think that's enough.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say these are our functioning manufacturing electricity. I would say after 1 month, that should send up a red flag.
I think that what they may need to do is they may take it down to replace shields, and it's going to take 4 months to do that, and that can't be then considered that they are no longer operating. That's not abandonment. I think that you might be right, perhaps we need to say 6 months, because that should give you enough time to change out panels, because they're going to have to take something down for a while for any kind of maintenance.
Well, I think if there's going to be maintenance or something like that, they should notify the town.
Well, I think that's, and the thing is they will, because that's part of the maintenance. But if 1 year is too long, I think 6 months is possible. But you have to give people enough space to say, we're taking it down, we're bringing something in, we're changing something. We would do that for any commercial activity. Because this has to do with commercial spaces and manufacturing spaces, not just RFRA. So perhaps we could discuss 6 months instead of 1 year. And I think one of the other questions you have is what happens if it's sold? If it's sold, all of the regulations that we had originally would stay, so that the next owner has to follow the same regulations that we had in the beginning.
And if they hire a savvy lawyer.
We have a savvy lawyer too.
You're going to have a savvy lawyer. Anybody can do it at any time for any reason.
We can look to reduce that to 6 months, possibly. So that's a good change.
What's another question you might be looking for?
There's nothing in here about cleaning these panels. And they would need a lot of water to clean these panels.
I think it's going to be cleaning panels, they will be ready to
Well, in everything I've read, the panels have to be cleaned because if they're, like for instance, in my yard, there is growth that, just because we're a rural area, so though everything I've read says that they're clean. So will they be drilling wells? Where are they going to get the water to clean?
I know at all the planning board, they have to involve, the planning board also seems to consider that they don't, just not, they don't expect that they would like to.
So I know on the bottom of page 9, Lauren, it does mention the applicant shall maintain the PSES in a neat, clean, and operable condition at all times, ensuring the structural and technical integrity. All maintenance shall be performed in a timely manner. Maintenance shall include but not limited to structural repairs of integrity of security measures. Site access maintained by the fire chief. Again, they do have a maintenance plan too that I'm sure that deals with the maintenance and cleaning of those panels. But we've made sure that there's no chemicals, just water.
Well, that's my question, where are they going to?
Yeah.
But there's nothing that's holding them to that.
No. They're gonna truck it in, yeah. Oh,
I'll say that's not a definitive answer, and that concerns me, because if they're going to drill a well, how is that going to affect my well? And all of that, I mean, how much water are they going to be using? What's my recourse if these happen?
So you drill your well, that's just real life. I mean, that's what people do.
Well, not really. This isn't real life, Barbara, when we are talking about putting something in that really doesn't belong.
yeah. Right. So I guess we can try and find an answer on the maintenance plans in the past, how they dealt with the cleaning of that. That's an easy find, I think, Lauren. So I can, when you call me, give me a few days to research that, and I can do that.
And that would be something that under development plan review, the planning board would deal with. They'd want to know, are you going to put in one well, or are you going to truck some more?
Right.
And the planning board can either tell them what they're going to do, or allow them to do something.
Right.
I'm not going to take you a lot of time. I have one last thing. It says no blasting.
Yes.
What about jackhammer?
Well, yeah, I guess they'll have to clear, if they hit into rock, I don't know how else they get it out.
Well, if they hit rock, they can't put one up.
Well, Bushy Brook is
Well, then they can't do it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
you're
it
right,
doesn't say jackhammer,
that's-
it doesn't say not, well, it doesn't say not jackhammer, I mean, I don't know.
Right.
Well, I also spoke to DEM, and they said when those trucks are coming in, they emit toxic fumes from just the trucks being there. Very, very toxic, very hazardous. How long are we going to allow construction? How long are we going to be breathing that? I mean, are we going to set a time frame for construction, or can they have carte blanche?
No, it's in the development plan review, how much time they can have. It's a planning board document.
And what about the toxic fuels coming from
Exhaust count, I don't know, this truck's operating as toxic, going down the highway.
Well,
it's toxic.
that's a proposal, it's not approved.
Yeah, but a house isn't,
It's the same process.
yeah, but you know what, Barbara, that sounds like a little passive. This is our health we're talking about. This isn't about a house, this isn't about a barking dog next door. This is big health concerns. And I have done a lot of research, and maybe I'm not eloquent when I get up here and I speak.
Doing great.
But I'm very passionate about this. A week before Christmas, this is not what I want to be doing. I didn't want to stand out in the rain with pneumonia, but I feel very, very passionate about this. I don't try to say that this is very, very concerning. And it's not about change, it's not that, I'm not against solar. Put it in the appropriate place. And are you at all concerned that these developers are right here? And why? And they're trying to get all of this in under the gun because the state hasn't passed laws and we don't have regulations right now. And that's why I'm very proud that we are doing this. But they are going to run amok as long as they can.
Lauren, just one little thing.
Yeah.
This ordinance that we're amending, prior to the changes we're proposing, or everyone's proposing, we still had a ordinance, so they did have to follow this ordinance up to, I mean, we had an ordinance done a couple of years ago, so there was an ordinance in place, you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, now we're amending it. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think they're gonna run them up as long as they can.
If we try and close and set a date for a decision,
So
then,
how many is too many? Right now, I think we can let it go, but that's just my opinion.
yep. Thanks. So I'll get back to you on that,
Thank
the
you.
cleaning aspect.
And thank you for letting me speak.
You're
It's
welcome.
important for us to be
You're welcome.
able to at least have a little bit of dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. So call me in a couple days, give me a couple days.
I'll call you after Christmas.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Lauren.
Enjoy the holidays.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you for listening.
Justin, I know you've been patient, thanks.
A couple. I'll be very quick. First thing, thank you. I was a little surprised at just the amount of work and how meticulous. I was shocked a couple times by a big contract language kind of geek, as dry as it is. So the details, Sylvia, a couple times, Barbara, you had about just the minutia of the language. I appreciate that. So that's the beauty is in the details, unfortunately. Two quick things on page, I believe it was on page 8, that dealt with the maintaining of records and contact information. We're in number 2. Yes. Would it be too much to require in there as well, something along the lines of like a 30-day notification requirement to assist in that? Like we would be notified when they do sell that, just to make it easier for contact information?
Transfer information?
Yes. I think it would be a great idea.
Do you hear that, Jim?
And I just had a question on page 7 at the bottom, where Barbara, you had struck the "if possible" from the historic portion, which I approve greatly of that, thank you. I just, because I have a question, I live without naming across property that's big train wreck, and it's abuts the tail end of Tamaqua National Historic Site. So I just am curious what's envisioned by saving the view and considering that. Like if I was standing on the historic property, would I be able to see things? If that possibly could be clarified further. I'm not sure how, but a little bit more concrete language. Page 7 at the bottom, number 2.
That's the historic districts, and we only have one historic district in the town of Hopkinton, which is in the city.
Okay. Can it apply to, and I'm not sure of my own ignorance, the numbers of national historic sites? I believe the Tamaqua Indian Rock Shelters are, and I have no idea if there are others in the town. So I guess my question is just what would constitute if it did incorporate national historic sites, what would constitute, saving that view?
I think to your point, Sylvia, I think to clarify very good, there's only one historic district, and that's what this.
Okay, well then my recommendation would be to include outside of, and thank you for that, outside of historic districts, any nationally recognized historic sites as well. It's after the fact, but just in the future. That was it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's nationally, so establishing historic districts or nationally recognized historic sites.
Yeah. And again, just curious about what would, just clarifying language about the view. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Justin.
Did you get that, Lisa?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good, me too.
Jeff, just again, let us know what page you have a question.
All right, first I'd just like to say thank you to each of the council members for your hard work, your willingness to listen. You've obviously put a lot of work into changing the ordinance on the information the town residents have provided to you, so thank you for that. On page 9, number 5, financial security. I remember Councilwoman Capalbo saying that the town was going to keep the interest on the, we can't do that?
That's the point of the bond.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have it grow over time so they can decommission it.
Right, right.
I tried. Okay, all right, and just to each of you, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, happy and healthy 2019.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes.
Let's know what page and number you have questions on.
Yeah, my question concerns items on page N. N, the unknown. Every time we have these discussions with the people who want to build stuff, something else comes up that nobody had anticipated. Then we try to work ourselves back into it and fix the problem that we didn't know was coming. What's not coming? I understand the pressure you're under. I appreciate that. But trying to rush this through and get this done, we got here because we ignored the comprehensive plan. We have a document that already told us what to do. We had a planning board that told us what to do. We ignored it and we rushed through it, and now we're stuck with this. I appreciate what it's trying to do. I'm concerned about what we can't anticipate.
I don't know if I can answer that question, but I guess I understand what your concerns are. Thank you. Yes, Deb.
Just let us know what page and number.
This is on page 2D. Sherry was talking about that section previously. The sentence that
Let us catch up to you.
applicability, D.
Page
2. Thank you. The ordinance applies to all PSES to be constructed after the effective date of this ordinance was the sentence in question. But that was part of the original ordinance. That's been there all along. That's nothing new.
Right.
Why are we going to change it now? Just saying.
Right.
Fair enough. Don't wait.
Another question.
Barbara.
No, I think she did. Do you have another question? No, I had answered already. Oh, okay.
Thanks, Deb.
All right.
John.
I wasn't going to. And
You don't have to, if you don't want. Just let us know what page.
sure, it's in here more than once. This is it's all the used to be language. So it happens on number 1 under C, PESCS design guidelines on page 5. It happens on number 13
What's
on page
happening?
4.
Wait, you're losing me. What's happening?
I'm calling it the used to be language.
The used
So,
to be?
and I don't even know if this is enforceable. I would, defer to the solicitor. In instances where a parcel is rezoned
Where are you?
from,
Where are you? You're going to tell us what page?
I'm on page 5, number 1, the recently added blue text, and there's similar language on the previous page. In instances where a parcel is rezoned from residential to commercial or manufacturing. What do we call that? Like, what is the name of that? Because it's not commercial, it's commercial with baggage. Commercial spec, I mean, is that a thing?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, and that lasts forever, so if you changed it.
Until they decommission, yeah.
Until they decommission, so,
So commercial special. If it's
well, I just didn't know if that's
Yeah, it does stay until we stop doing that particular
use. So
Then we have to advertise.
if one of the ones that is approved under this condition shuts down for a fean months and someone else decides to rebuild, then that's hunky-dory for us forever, as long as that. I mean, assuming someone decommissions and then another party wants to buy that property and,
do so, they can continue. That's correct, John.
okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let us know what page and number.
First question. You're 3%, 10%, or 15%. Can you tell me what it is? Because there's a big difference. It's 20%, 100 acres, 15%, 10%, or 3%. So 3% is somewhat acceptable. You know, if you have to go at all, it's 3%, but 15% is a lot more. So you are, I think you said 15.
I said 15, right.
And the other
I can
people,
go for the 3, or as long as it does something similar to the farm viability ordinance, which was brought up. You can only let the farmers do so much. Why are you letting them do more? So it might be the 3% might be an easy answer. But yeah, I'll go for that.
I understand, but the board hasn't agreed on that yet. Haven't agreed.
No.
It's a follow part.
So,
For my part, Councilor,
Page 3.
Councilor Thompson said, I will do 3%. My only goal, and if people know my position on solar and RFE, is to help farmers and large landowners who might have tax problems, not just somebody to come in and go, we're nuts over solar. Just a consideration for tax benefits only, not to make money per se. That's my...
I think that was the goal, but then people have taken advantage of it, and now they click on hundreds of acres and destroying thousands of trees. And I think, from what I've heard tonight, you're at the mindset to try to restrict that now.
Yeah, rein it in.
But I mean, 3%, 0 would be great, and 3% is a great step towards the new goal. And so my next question, I lost it. So I want to address this paragraph on page 8, where you guys said the tribal cultural impacts. Hopkinton, it's not, how are my glasses on? Is that 6? Here you go, it's right here. These paragraphs.
yeah, it's page 6.
Okay, page 6. So, as Sylvia in Scotland, I've lived here my whole life and I went to school with them. And our community in Hopkinton, rural community, had, we went to school with the Browns. We went to, there's a big impact on meetings. And the project in Maxon Hill, I know we don't want to mention the ones, but the ones on Maxon, the Indian shelter rocks,
Ceremonial stones.
yes, that are on Maxon Street, up on Maxon Hill. The project is 20 across the street. You're going to clear cut, you're going to disturb all that, and there's the Indian artifacts. There should be some type of search and check there, like they did up in Sylvia. You said where they did go, and they did check, and they found Indian
Here
artifacts.
in town, Lawton Foster North.
Right. So I think that should be checked up there, but you want to strike it right from the whole ordinance. So that if you did that, it wouldn't come into play. And in that project, the shelter area, and it should be addressed because it is right across the street. So if you take it out, then that's not going to be an avenue.
Right, it's also private land, and also I think, like I said in my commentary on this, as to why I wanted to strike it, I've experienced that on the 216 project where and I know what they did with the current owner of that land, and that wasn't a good picture. And so I think, with all due respect to the tribe, I think they have certain goals in mind, but I think open it up to every parcel in town because it's just a bad sense of bad precedent. It opens Pandora's box, and I've experienced firsthand.
Well, I have, you have more experience, but
it's just
for that project, so is there a different avenue that you take to have that checked?
I've been
or
waiting.
you just let them destroy it?
Well, I've been waiting for Mr. Brown to email me, and he has not done that. He's mentioned certain aspects of what he wanted to accomplish, and he mentions things before the last meeting we had at the high school, and I told him, I don't understand the language you're using, so you got to email me and tell me what you want to do, and he never did. So like I said, I'm still going to stand by. It's up to the board.
So the project that I'm speaking of, Maxon, it just moves on without any
I'm not
big
talking about
destroys?
specific projects, like I said. Yeah, so this particular verbiage, I think is dangerous at best, and I think Barbara has mentioned that too. So we can still, revisit that, but again, I'd have to take a long hard look at it because I just don't think it. And also, I think our planning board chair restated the reasons why you probably should strike it. So, anyway, I
and I
understand your
lost
concerns.
my third So, but you just mentioned the planning board, which I'm guilty of not being very involved in what's going on, but like to have started because of this array program and destruction of all the rural areas that we have. I went to a planning board meeting, they said, town council doesn't listen to anything they say. So my question would be, I heard someone else say earlier that you can just deny these plans. So this new ordinance will not affect the ones that you've already approved.
Right.
So let me ask you this question. So you approved a rezoning, if this is not about zoning. So now when the planning board comes back to you and says that they don't recommend this project,
If they give an advisory opinion that's adverse.
so you could just say no to that or no?
Correct. That's-
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Then they would reapply and this ordinance would apply.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Carol? Okay. Well, Sherry already went, so you're not going to get off that easy. Let's stick to the ordinance here and tell me what page and number.
Page 4, number 12, where you talk about exposure to radiation. One of my concerns has been about high-tension power lines, so I wondered if that would fall into that category if high-tension power lines have to be installed along roadways, in front of houses, and, you know, the impact of the EMFs from those. So I don't know if something could be added around that.
Just wants to say, and.
Yeah, something about the high-tension power lines, because I know I've read that you should not have them within 700 feet of a residence, things along those lines.
Just add that.
And then I think Lauren mentioned it, but it was hard to hear on page 5 where he talked about blasting. Can you add that the hydraulic hammers can't be used either to make it clear?
They have to put in metal support. I mean, how are they going to do it day by hand?
Okay.
I mean, I just think, you know, if we start going down.
Al, when you guys said no blasting, were you acceptable to?
Can they do hydraulic hammering with the excavators, with those hydraulic hammers?
I think the blasting comment came from someone else.
Okay.
And we were delighted to include it. I wasn't, we know about the hydraulic hammer.
Do you have an opinion about the hydraulic?
My husband worked in a quarry and he said it just shook the buildings and, you know.
If you want it, prohibit it. If you don't want it, prohibit it.
Why would it just go right down to the...
You don't want blasting?
Yeah, because I mean, the jackhammers are used for stone and rock, not for digging holes. So it'd be for getting rid of boulders. So if you could add something around that. My other, yep. I don't know how to word it.
Yeah. Can you just say no blasting or no blasting?
Yep. Yes.
Well, just add
yes.
that.
Hydraulic.
No hydraulic hammers.
Right.
Right. Just put right after the word.
Yeah. Right with the blasting.
Hydraulic.
And then there was like a general theme on things for me. I mean, on page 5 at the very bottom, they talk about the applicant submitting an environmental impact statement, et cetera. One thing that had me concerned as I go to different hearings is that I don't think those are objective. So anywhere we can put things that, you know, can the planning board be the ones to select whoever submits all of those, you know, the environmental impacts and...
But they do. The developer has his, and the planning board chooses an entirely
Okay.
what to do. But they do that already. That's already done.
All right, I guess that might be it, because that's kind of the rest of my theme was about worrying about the subjectivity on a lot of those things.
Sorry for me again.
Is there anyone that hasn't spoke? This young lady. That's you.
Me? Thank you.
Just tell us what page and number.
Okay, the thing that I'm primarily concerned about is page 4, 13. A number of people have already talked about that. I feel very strongly that it should reflect something similar to the farm viability ordinance. But I feel really strongly that something like the lesser of 3% or 3 acres. Okay, that's sort of what I think would be appropriate. I know we talked, a few people have talked about page 6, the tribal cultural impacts, and I certainly understand what everybody has said about that. And I think that if we go with these smaller amounts for these properties, that is not as important. I think this is really important because we have been talking about much larger pieces of property lately. But I just want to go on the record as saying that I would support that if we were talking about larger pieces.
That's a good point.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Joe, anything?
Thanks, Joe. I rest in peace. You already spoke, John. Oh, she spoke too. Okay.
Go ahead.
I didn't get to see what I wrote. I didn't get to see what I wrote. That was kind of an aside.
You get to say
what this was planned.
Sorry.
Page and number.
Sure. Page 3, number 9. Are we there? Okay. The establishment of the proposed PSE will not prevent the normal and orderly use, development, or improvement of the adjacent property for uses permitted in the district. I take that to mean if you're currently a butter in an RFR 80 zone, that any proposed PSES, shouldn't have any kind of effect on that. And what I'd like to read is just something that I wrote, and it's not pertaining to any particular project unless you wanted to read into that, but there's no name of it. Here's what I wrote. If a utility scale industrial power plant project is to require 6 or more months of construction, as noted by the developer or extrapolated by the town based on other projects, then notification to all abutters and residents within 500 feet shall be given in the form of formal written notification of the possible disruptions, disturbances, as well as potential hazards that could occur to their home, property, and animals if applicable, as a result of said construction to install this industrial-sized solar array. Any and all concerns by those receiving the formal notice shall be resolved in a public hearing format to ensure all concerns, safety, health, and well-being of residents, as stated in the comprehensive plan, are addressed to their satisfaction prior to the start of any construction. Thank you.
All right, we got a couple more minutes here, folks.
Good night.
John, go ahead.
Just one little,
You got a page and number?
I don't have a page. As there's been conversation and discussion about the farm viability ordinance, just to kind of recap what the allotments are, a 15-acre farm is permitted 1 acre of solar, so there would be a tangible benefit to subdividing a 100-acre property into 6 lots, because then you could get 6 acres. So if you're going to mirror the language from the farm viability ordinance, just be aware that that is a provision. That's all.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, Sherry, could you bring that piece of paper maybe to Jim Lamphere? Because I'm not sure if the whole thing can go in, but certainly a part of it should. So if you could give that to him so you don't walk off with it, I'd appreciate it.
I think you should give it to the clerk.
Yeah, give it to the
So
clerk.
she can then
Okay.
let everybody have it, sure.
Yeah, no, just, okay. Okay. All right, folks, I need a motion to continue the hearing or to close it.
I move that we close the hearing and set a date for decision.
Sure. Oh, let me see if I can.
Talks about.
Okay, so I've got a motion on the floor, folks.
Who seconded the motion, please?
No one has it.
No one has.
Don't forget, if we continue this, it continues.
I'd
So,
like to make a motion to continue the hearing so that we can see this written out, be able to look at it one more time with one hearing. I understand that we need to get this finished, but I'd like to see it because we made a great many changes. I'd like to continue the hearing for one more.
right, Sylvia didn't get a second, so her motion fails. Barbara, you made a motion to continue. And?
I will,
Do we want to look at my motion again? Is there a second? to
I'll
close?
second her motion for, I'll second Sylvia's motion.
Right, that's after Barbara's. Right.
All right, so there was no second to Councilor Thompson's motion. There
Correct.
was no second to Councilor
Capalbo.
Capalbo's motion.
So
So
I
did
made
you
mine
want to
again.
try another motion?
Sylvia, make another motion.
I move that we close the hearing tonight.
And set a date for
Then
decision.
set a date for decision.
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All right. Discussion.
We have changed almost every single page, almost every single paragraph, and I would like to be able to see that and in writing, and I would like the public to see it in writing with all of the changes
Absolutely.
before we close the hearing. I do understand we need to do this quickly, but I don't think it is appropriate to close it until we have at least looked at it one more time. We have made an enormous amount of changes. They are all of great value, and we need to see it. So I am against the motion on the floor.
As I stated, I second it for discussion purposes only. I have a question of the solicitor. My concern is simply this. I want to do the right thing for the town, and I know people are watching us, people in the solar panel field, and is an extra month or an extra 2 weeks going to impact us that much? I'm concerned about the risk, and that's going to determine my vote, so I might support Councilor Capalbo. I'm really concerned about it. I think I know Mr. Moreau is he's concerned about seeing everything. I like to see everything myself, but I want to expedite this thing, so I do ask the solicitor this. Is it your opinion that it's so crucial to both to get this done now, close the hearing, or do we have the luxury of a few weeks?
Well, I'll answer it this way. Every day that passes without this ordinance being on the books, you run the risk of having another new solar project submitted in an application. And I would suggest to you that it's my opinion that once an application is complete and properly filed and accepted with the town, any change in any ordinances that could come up that might apply or affect that project will not apply to that project. That developer's rights have vested at that time. So to answer you this way, the council can do whatever it wants in terms of this motion. And I'm not going to give a judgment about whether it's crucial to do it tonight or another time, but I will tell you that the longer it takes you to pass an ordinance, the increased probability more and more applications are going to be filed with the town that this ordinance will not apply to. So that's the risk.
Still saying no.
Can I ask a question on that? I don't understand that.
We either close.
We just went over what the ordinance said.
Right.
We said that if it is not been constructed.
Oh, Lloyd, I know, I understand that verbiage needs to be addressed, and I think we're going to.
But what he was just saying.
Right, I am of the opinion.
I want to see proof of that.
Well, all right. Anyway, we have to discuss whether we're going to close or continue, so we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Mr. President.
We have a motion and seconded on the floor.
I'm going to vote against my own motion. I think that there's a sentiment in the crowd. I think there's a sentiment. I'm willing to take the risk. I hope I don't regret my decision, but I will vote against my own motion and support Councilor Capello. And I just hope that I'm not making a wrong gamble. Thank you.
Well, you didn't make the motion, Sylvia did, so you want to withdraw your second, I guess?
Let it go forward.
Okay, motion was made by Sylvia, seconded by Scott, to close the hearing and set a date for decision. All those in favor? Aye. All those not in favor?
Excuse me,
Joe, we're just voting.
I don't think that's what Scott said. Scott did not want to close the hearing.
You're correct, and he just said that.
He's voting against
He
it.
just said that.
I'm voting against my own
Yeah.
motion.
That's okay.
I'm trying to do the best job for this
Yeah,
town.
2 people voted.
All right. All right,
That's why I
so,
asked the solicitor. I don't want the horse to get out of the barn, I guess. I'm trying to be
While they're chatting, I had a suggestion.
considerate.
At the beginning of school.
You have due diligence and you follow.
Regardless of what it says, say no to so.
Willing to take the risk.
But there's advertising and people have to come out and you all come out and a new neighborhood will get upset. It doesn't matter. They're gonna be like, oh my God, they're gonna do it. And then you go have a hearing, then you have another hearing, then you don't close it, and it goes on and on and on. That's nuts.
I am making a motion that we should.
Wait.
She needs to know what
I
the other
need to
vote
know
was.
the results of the last vote. I have 2 in favor
And 3
and
no.
3 opposed.
Oh,
I
okay.
did not hear anything. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm making a motion that we're going to continue the hearing so that, and set a date for
The hearing?
set a date for the continued hearing, so that we can all take a look at this written from this particular hearing, written in a correct manner.
So motion was made.
I just want to know, does that continually means that the public can comment again?
Yes, it's a hearing.
Okay, that's fine.
That's fine.
I second.
Okay. Motion was made and seconded. All those in favor of continuing the hearing and setting a date for the next hearing?
Aye.
All those not in favor?
No.
No. Okay. So motion passes. All right. So Lisa, when's the next reasonable
I'm
time?
still rating. Wait a minute.
Oh, wait a minute. Give her a minute.
All right.
All right, so you have quite a busy schedule in January. January 7th is your regular town council meeting at the town hall. It's for commercial haulers renewal, so that's the reason it's at the town hall. So you could technically have it there if you have the same amount of people that are in the audience this evening, that you just don't want to exceed capacity. I can't predict how many people are going to show up, so that's what that night is. You have a special town council meeting at the Tower Hill Middle School to deal with a solar proposal that you have not heard yet for Main Street. That's on Monday the 14th.
Omnibus is on the 9th.
I'm not even dealing with that. On Tuesday the 22nd, you have another town council meeting at the Tower Hill Middle School to deal with the Skunk Hill solar matter. On Monday, January 28th, another meeting at the Tower Hill Middle School to decide on the Brushy Brook proposal.
Decision.
Yes, thank you.
So that's,
So those 3 guys can figure out. what
yeah,
they're
so let you guys that want to continue,
Wanna
you guys figure the date out and let us know.
doing. Oh, when did you say Brushy Brook was?
28th.
28th. So some questions should be made of Mr. Ren Lampier, who's been incorporating these changes, and how much time it's going to take him to incorporate the changes that were made tonight and get them to the council. He's been very good about getting them ahead of time, so you can see him in advance of a meeting. So that's a question for Jim.
When are you available? Are you available this summer?
Yeah.
Can you come down to the 7th or the 14th? We want as soon as possible to get done and make it happen. And I want especially everyone to take a look at it.
Yeah, well, how would you like to receive, I mean, the more changes we make, the messier and messier the documents get. Okay, so what I gave you this time here was an addendum of the comments that came from the last public hearing. Now, I can prepare another addendum of what was added tonight, and then you can review that, and then at some point, you're gonna incorporate all these changes into an ordinance that you're comfortable with adopting. So, again, these things get awful sloppy to read and whatnot, but I want to turn it around quick because I want it out of my office and I got things to do. But I don't want to, I'm really uninterested in going to continuous public hearings on these things because, as I said earlier, and I don't, and again, most of the comments that came tonight that I heard were very closely related to zone change projects, okay? Again, I'm more concerned about getting an ordinance that the planning board can apply to by right projects that can come in, which we still don't have anything better than what we had. And keep in mind, the first project that we did, the Bank Street project, there is no decommissioning fee associated with that because we didn't have the ordinance at the time. That was approved without ordinance 246. So now we got 246, and now we, amend it. Now I'm going to prepare something, and we still have questions as to what's going to be 30%, 15, 10, 3%, 3 acres. We're going into another public hearing with as many questions as we came into this one. So I can turn around something really quick for
We
you.
can turn it around, if you can give it to us by the 14th, it gives the town council plenty of time to look at it. Because maybe you can get it to us by the 10th. We can have time to look at it, the public can have time to look at it. If we could do it on the 14th and we can vote on it on the 28th.
Yeah, I'll have it by the 7th if you want. I'll turn it around
We can
quick.
vote on the 28th, because it's just a vote.
That's the other vote, that's the Bushy vote too.
I know it is. We can do the vote, because
It's a full month away, more than a month away.
But when we go into that public hearing, we're still going to have to make more decisions that I can't make with,
On the fly.
with
So
this.
should we move it on the 7th is fine with me.
7th? I can get it to you. Because there'll probably be more changes anyway.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so
So as I understand it, you want this on for January 7th as a continued hearing,
correct.
and then potentially
2 weeks out from that, I guess. Yeah, for a decision. Right. They were saying the same day as the Brushy Brook decision, but I don't know. That's the 28th. Okay. I can't imagine, please.
I move this meeting adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.